Chapter 348. Lieutenant Zhang. What was written on the arrow that Xiling shot over earlier? Su Gan suddenly turned to Zhang Lin and asked. There was a white cloth hanging on the arrow that Bai Xiling had shot over. Other than the pills that had helped them immensely, there were also many words written on the white cloth. However, Zhang Lin didn't mention a single word about the contents of the white cloth. That letter was actually written for me by that lord. I'll show it to you if we manage to escape from here. That lord has instructed me time and time again not to show the letter to anyone other than me. It's written on it how we can escape. That's probably our only way, and also our last chance. Zhang Lin said with a bitter smile. Oh, even we are not allowed to see it? Su Gan asked. Even though Zhang Lin didn't say it out loud, Su Gan knew that the only person whom Zhang Lin could refer to as that lord was probably Wang Chong. Zhang Lin nodded earnestly. Su Gan fell silent. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something, and he subconsciously turned to look at Huang Yongtu. The only reason why Wang Chong would instruct them time and time again not to show the letter was probably Huang Yongtu. That fellow was probably worried about Huang Yongtu. Bastard. At the same time, Huang Yongtu also came to a realization. Veins popped up on his forehead, and rage burned in his heart. Even though he didn't say a word, he wasn't deaf. He didn't miss a single word that Su Gan and Zhang Lin had said. What does that bastard mean by that? Does he not trust me? Huang Yongtu's face was flushed red from anger. At a time like this, she actually said that she didn't trust him. How could he endure this? Be it Zhang Lin or Su Gan, they wisely turned their heads away, pretending that they hadn't heard Zhang Lin's words at all. Huang Yongtu and Wang Chong had been at loggerheads along the way. It was understandable why Wang Chong wouldn't tell him about it. Lord, what do we do next? On the eastern path, Ma Song suddenly asked. His words attracted everyone's attention, and they all looked at Wang Chong, who was at the front of the group. The stalemate had been going on for quite some time now, but this wasn't enough to save Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. Furthermore, the bandit leader of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen hadn't made a move yet. At the very least, he hadn't made a move against them yet. It would be great if we could spread the news. Another 10-man squad leader said. It's useless. The capital is very far from here, and even the nearest garrison is 3 to 4 days away. If we wait until then, it will be too late. Bai Xiling was the one who spoke. She immediately rejected the 10-man squad leader's idea. In other words, we can only rely on ourselves to save them now. Xiling is right. The other party even shot down the pigeons sent by the imperial court as soon as possible. Their goal was to prevent us from spreading the news. They won't let us have that chance. Wang Chong frowned. In order to prevent all kinds of cheating, before the mission was completed, no one was allowed to bring in any kind of communication device. As a result, when Wang Chong and the others were in danger, they were unable to communicate with the outside world at all. Moreover, the road to the west had always been the most remote, desolate, and unfrequented mountain range. Apart from the occasional traveling merchant, there were even fewer people who came here. If not for the fact that it was far away from the royal court, there wouldn't have been so many bandits and highwaymen in the first place. In other words, the only hope they had to save Su Gan and the others was the 42 of them. Furthermore, that isn't what I'm most concerned about. There's something else that I'm more worried about. Wang Chong said with a deep voice. What is it? Those words made everyone's heart tighten, and they turned to look at Wang Chong. Do you feel anything? Bai Xiling asked uneasily. At this moment, Wang Chong was the anchor of the entire army. If even he was feeling uneasy, the others would be even more so. Before today, Bai Xiling would have never imagined that she, along with 40 veteran cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others, would place their hopes on a young man much younger than them. But everything had happened just like that. Regardless of whether it was her or the others, no one felt that anything was amiss. Xiling, why do you think Iron Cloakly isn't making a move? Wang Chong suddenly asked. Bai Xiling was taken aback. For a moment, she found herself unable to keep up with Wang Chong's thoughts. Given the current situation, we might not be able to save Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. But Iron Cloak Li and the others won't be able to deal with us either. The reason why we aren't in a hurry is because we can at least pin down the bulk of their strength and protect Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. But why isn't Iron Cloak Li in a hurry? Given their strength, they could have easily devoured Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. Even though they would have to pay a price, it's still within their means. But they chose not to do so. That's because they want to use Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others to pin us down. If Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others were to die, we would have retreated immediately. But now that we are here, why isn't he making a move? With his back facing Bai Siling, Wang Chang's gaze pierced through space to look at the bandit chief and the military advisor on the boulder behind the bandits and highwaymen. To be able to control so many bandits and highwaymen and make them work for him, there was no doubt about Iron Cloak Li's capability. Furthermore, to be able to mobilize the bandits and highwaymen who had relied on him so effectively when he had just charged in and crushed their front lines. The military advisor was able to react in a timely and effective manner. On top of that, he was able to see through the fact that the cavalrymen were unable to traverse through the mountain slope and mobilize the bandits and highwaymen to flank him from both sides to counter his cavalrymen. Facing such an opponent, Wang Chong couldn't afford to underestimate them. If he were to underestimate them, it would only lead to his own defeat and an unacceptable outcome. You mean? Hearing Wang Chong's words, Bai Siling also frowned. She seemed to have thought of something as well. Tell me, let's see if we share the same thoughts. Wang Chong said grimly. A storm seemed to be brewing between his brows. The reason why they aren't making a move yet is because they are waiting for an opportunity to crush us completely? Bai Siling probed. Wang Chong nodded solemnly. That's what I'm thinking as well. Those Iron Cloak highwaymen are too calm, to the point that it's ridiculous. If I'm not mistaken, the military advisor of the Iron Cloak highwaymen must have made some arrangements behind our backs. Then what should we do? Bai Siling's face warped in astonishment, and she found it hard to maintain her composure. 500 to 600 bandits and highwaymen were already difficult to deal with. If they had some sort of trump card up their sleeves, they would be in deep trouble. Perhaps, not only would they be unable to save Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others, they might even lose their lives. It's too late. If I'm not mistaken, they should be nearing the end of their preparations. It's too late for us to retreat now, Wang Chong said grimly. Around them, the sound of the wind surged. The entire army was deathly silent. The atmosphere was extremely stifling. This was the first time a regular army of the Tang dynasty had been forced into such a state by bandits and highwaymen. But the predicament they were in was right before them. No matter how formidable the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen were, it would be difficult for them to deal with 500 to 600 bandits and highwaymen. Not to mention, there were quite a few true martial realm highwaymen among them. The difference in numbers was simply too great. Furthermore, according to Li Tsangqi's words, Iron Cloak Li was at least a true martial realm 5-dan expert. Coupled with his unique Iron Cloak technique, if they were to wait for him to make a move, the situation would be even more perilous. Seated on the back of the white-hoofed shadow, countless thoughts flashed across Wang Chang's mind. Bai Siling knew that Zhang Xian was deep in thought. Even though she was anxious, she knew that she shouldn't disturb him, so she could only forcefully suppress her emotions. Time slowly passed, and after an unknown period of time, Bai Siling finally couldn't take it anymore. Have you thought of something? There's only one way out of this predicament, and it's also the last and only way. What is it? Bai Siling asked. Wang Chong chuckled silently. His gaze swept across the space before him, landing on the Iron Cloak highwayman chief and the military advisor. But before that, we still have some other matters to attend to. Wang Chong waved his hands, and the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen immediately retreated around the corner. What are they trying to do? As soon as Wang Chong left, Iron Cloak Li immediately frowned. Could it be possible that they have discovered our plan? Iron Cloak Li had traversed the mountains unhindered, and regardless of whether it was merchants or soldiers, he would kill as he pleased without any qualms. But this time, Iron Cloak Li felt as though he was being held back. The reason was simple. This group of 40 soldiers was too threatening to him. That shouldn't be possible. I've already instructed them to circle around the mountain ridge. Even a bird wouldn't be alarmed by their presence. It's impossible for them to sense anything from the surroundings. Furthermore, since they are already here, even if they were to sense something, they wouldn't be able to leave so easily. My intuition is that they have only left temporarily, and they aren't too far away either. Zhouan said after a moment of contemplation. Men, send a scout out to take a look. Iron Cloakly pondered for a moment before waving his hands. Yes, Lord. A highwayman scout quickly acknowledged the order and left. Damn it. Could it be that these fellows sensed danger and abandoned us to escape? On the slope, as soon as Wang Chong and Bai Siling made a move, Huang Yongta couldn't help but curse anxiously. He wasn't someone who would lose his composure in the first place. But his life was at stake, and every single action of Wang Chong and the others concerned his life. Thus, Huang Yongta couldn't help but be alarmed. Huang Yongtu had never experienced such a dangerous situation, since he was born in a large clan and had an illustrious status. Had he known that he would be in such a predicament, he would have never participated in this expedition. Chapter 349. Don't worry, if that lord wanted to escape, he wouldn't have come here in the first place. Besides, if he wanted to leave, he would have already left. A voice came from the side. It was Zhang San comforting her. Huang Yongta felt a little better. Hiya. At the same time, the clopping of hooves could be heard. Turning around, Huang Yongta saw an iron cloak highwayman, with a valiant aura galloping off in the direction where Wang Chong and the others had retreated. Bung! Almost at the same time, a bowstring vibrated, and a massive metal arrow shot out from the corner of the main road. With just a single arrow, it pierced through the head of the iron cloak highwayman. The immense force of the arrow pierced through his forehead and out through the back of his head. Fresh blood splattered everywhere, and the highwayman was sent flying from his steed. The arrow pierced into the trunk of a large tree on the slope behind. Ah! Exclamations of shock and gasps could be heard from the crowd. Everyone was stunned by the arrow. No one could have imagined that Wang Chong and the others would stay behind while retreating. That arrow was incomparably swift. Be it in terms of speed, strength, or timing, it left no room for anyone to dodge at all. That iron cloak highwayman scout didn't even have time to react before the arrow pierced through his head. You've really guessed it. You've succeeded. At the same time, about 50 zhang away from the corner, Bai Siling slowly sheathed her bow and turned around with a confident smile. Then, she made a V gesture to Wang Chong. Well done. Wang Chong chuckled. Bai Siling didn't specialize in archery, but her archery skills were already astounding. She was the one with the highest attainment in archery among the group, and her arrows had never missed their target. Let's go. With this arrow, they should at least be a little wary. They won't be able to scout as freely as they like. Besides, if we can eliminate one of them, we should at least try our best to whittle down their strength. Wang Chong said. There were simply too many iron cloak highwaymen, and it was impossible to defeat them head-on. Thus, Wang Chong could only think of a way to whittle away at their strength like water droplets grinding a stone. Wang Chong waved his hand, and the 40 cavalrymen continued to gallop out. Bastard! On the boulder, Iron Cloak Li's complexion turned awful upon seeing the scout he had sent out being pierced through the head by an arrow. Again, waving his hands grandly, Iron Cloak Li sent another subordinate over. Gallop, gallop. The second Iron Cloak highwayman was much more cautious than before. Moving as one with his steed, he circled around the corner. Barely after he had galloped for a short distance, pung! The bowstring vibrated, and another arrow pierced through his skull. But this time, the iron arrow was shot from the forest. Second one. Bai Siling slung her bow and arrows on her back, mounted her horse, and with a squeeze of her legs, she immediately leapt out of the forest. When Wang Chong retreated earlier, only the 40 cavalrymen had followed him. However, Bai Siling didn't leave. Instead, she had hidden herself behind the forest. That highwayman was so focused on chasing after her that he didn't expect Bai Siling to be hiding behind the forest. Caught off guard, he fell for the arrow once more. Damn it! Hearing that the galloping of the steed had stopped after turning the corner, Iron Cloak Lee knew that the second scout must have been killed as well. Again, with a livid face, Iron Cloak Lee waved his hand and sent out another scout. But this time around he was much smarter. He sent out 3 scouts, and they carefully circled around the corner before heading to the main road and 2 hills to the left and right. This way, they could avoid being ambushed by the other party. But this time, they were welcomed by 4 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, as well as by Xiling herself. As intense as the battle was, it ended swiftly as well. 3 highwayman scouts faced off against 5 true martial realm experts, and it didn't take long for them to lose their lives. This was truly an awkward situation. Due to Wang Chong's retreat, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had lost 6 of their brothers before they could gather any intelligence. Furthermore, they weren't mere subordinates, but Iron Cloak Lee's true subordinates. A deathly silence fell over the massive boulder. "Advisor, what do you think?" Iron Cloak Lee finally turned to Zhou and asked. This advisor of the Iron Cloak highwayman was similarly silent. The young man from the training camp was simply too crafty. His every move was completely out of the ordinary. Even if it was Zhou himself, he wasn't confident that he would be able to escape unscathed under the other party's schemes. But it just so happened that they couldn't just leave the other party alone. Otherwise, there would be no order to their attack or retreat. If Wang Chong hadn't gone far and launched a surprise attack, they would truly be in deep trouble. After all, warhorses could wrap cloth around their hooves to reduce the sound of their hooves. "Chief, I don't think that there's a need to increase our manpower. If the other party returns and hides behind the corner, unless we send at least 200 men, we'll just be sending ourselves to our deaths. If that's the case, it's better to send someone who's more agile and skilled. If you're worried about the other party's archery, we can find a way to equip them with a metal shield," Zhou said after a moment of contemplation. Naturally, they didn't have the standard shields and tower shields that were commonly used in the military. However, it shouldn't be a problem for them to craft a simple shield with a few pieces of metal. Zhou orders were swiftly relayed down. After losing 3 of their skilled brothers, Iron Cloak Lee and Zhou finally received the news that they wanted to hear. Reporting to Chief, they haven't gone far. They are resting at an area 300 zhang away. Got it. We'll look into it after an incense's time. Yes, Chief. The highwayman scout quickly retreated. After the scout left, Iron Cloak Lee turned to Zhou and with a frown on his forehead. "I don't know what they're up to either. But of course, we can't rule out the possibility that they're just trying to fool us." Knowing what Iron Cloak Lee was thinking, Zhou shook his head. It was rare for him to encounter such an elusive opponent that he could not fathom or see through. If not for the fact that the other party was a student of the training camp, it would have been impossible for him to become a bandit and call them brothers. He really wanted to convince the chief to recruit that young man. But regardless of what they're up to, it's sufficient as long as they don't leave. In the end, not a single one of them will be able to leave. Zhou stroked his beard confidently as a scheming glint flashed across his eyes. Time is of the essence, and we don't have much time left. The next few hours will determine the fate of us, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu and the others. Therefore I hope that from now on, everyone will listen carefully to every order that I say. At the same time, 300 zhang away from the corner, Wang Chong was gathering 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty for a final speech. It was rare for Wang Chong to have such a serious expression on his face. Most of the time, he had a calm and wise expression on his face. As such, many of the cavalrymen could sense the heavy atmosphere, and they couldn't help but put on a solemn expression. "Ma Song, lead your men, and form an orderly formation at the front to confuse them. The rest of you, listen to my orders," Wang Chong said grimly. "Yes, Lord," the cavalrymen replied loudly. Of the 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, Ma Song and the other 20 had already received Wang Chong's training. Only the 20 cavalrymen under by Xiling had yet to undergo Wang Chong's training. Following which, Wang Chong divided the cavalrymen under by Xiling into 4 echelons as well, and he chose a 10-man commander and a 5-man commander as well. Time was of the essence, So Wang Chong instructed the 20 cavalrymen to undergo intense training on the main road. A battle could break out at any moment, and Wang Chong didn't have the luxury of time. Fortunately, these cavalrymen had followed Wang Chong through many joint operations, and on top of that, they had fought with the Iron Cloak highwaymen before, so they were able to familiarize themselves with Wang Chong's commands quickly. Roughly an hour later, the 20 cavalrymen in the 4 groups had already met Wang Chong's requirements. What comes next is the most important thing that all of you have heard. This concerns whether we will be annihilated or successfully exterminate these audacious highwaymen and uphold the dignity of the army and the royal court. I believe that none of you wish to die under the steeds of the highwaymen. After the training was completed, Wang Chong gathered all 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty. This is a small formation. This is the crux of the matter, so you must listen carefully. We only have the time of an incense stick. At the start, Bai Siling could still roughly understand what Wang Chong was saying. He knew that he was reorganizing the cavalrymen into more efficient units. However, what Wang Chong did afterwards was something that Bai Siling couldn't understand at all. Many of Wang Chong's orders and instructions were things that Bai Siling had never seen before, needless to say, come into contact with. Bai Siling believed that even those from prestigious military families wouldn't be able to comprehend this. Many of the things that Wang Chong had done were beyond Bai Siling's imagination. Due to her family background, Bai Siling had come into contact with many generals in the army, but none of them had ever displayed such abilities. Who in the world is this fellow? Bai Siling was getting more and more curious about Wang Chong's identity. Many of the things that he had done weren't things that ordinary people could understand. However, Bai Siling knew that time was of the essence, and this wasn't the time to ask such questions. Thus, she forcefully suppressed the impulse in her heart. But deep in her heart, Bai Siling had made up her mind that once this operation was over, and she could live a successful life, she would dig out Wang Chong's secrets no matter what, even if she had to be a scoundrel. The sky quickly darkened. Smoke began to rise from the official road, as Wang Chong's 40 cavalrymen began to dig a stove to cook. The others were on guard on the official road. The appetite of the 40 people was not small, so the green smoke from the fire was very big. It filled the entire public road, blurring everyone's figures. Chapter 350. Looks like we came at the right time. A Turkic man with a thick beard peeked out from behind the bushes, and the corners of his lips curled up into a sinister smile that left one's hair standing on end. They still have a fire to cook. It looks like they aren't prepared at all. Another man with thick arms and bulging muscles also popped his head out from behind the bushes and brambles. He had a squarish face, but he was a pure Han. Indeed, how could the military advisor's strategy possibly be wrong? Hee. The military advisor told us to circle to the rear and lure them over when they attack the soldiers from the front. After which, we'll launch a pincer attack from the front and the back, cutting off their path of retreat and annihilating them. However, I suddenly have a better idea. The bearded Turk looked down at the roiling smoke and gave a savage chuckle, a cruel and callous expression on his face. Perhaps we can catch them off guard while they are cooking and ambush them. No matter how formidable they are, they won't expect us to descend from the sky. As long as we can kill half of their men in an instant, the rest won't pose a threat. Hu Lang, are you out of your mind? The muscular man beside him was shocked to hear those words. He widened his eyes and stared at Hu Lang. Are you intending to change the military advisor's plan? Hee Chang Dao. You haven't been to the north, so you don't know how fearsome the wolves are. When they hunt, they will hide in the bushes, boulders, and bushes to slowly approach their prey. Then, when their prey is caught off guard, they will suddenly pounce out from their backs and launch a vicious attack. It's rare for prey to escape from such an attack. There are only 40 of them, and at least half of them have put down their weapons and gotten off their steeds. This is the moment when they are least prepared, so there's no better opportunity to attack them. On the grasslands, if our Turkic army were to encounter such an opportunity, they would definitely not let it slip by. The military advisor isn't aware of what we are seeing at the moment, but if he knew, he would surely agree to our plan. Hu Lang sneered savagely. He licked his lips, and his crimson tongue curled up to the tip of his nose. The muscular man with thick arms had a gloomy expression on his face. At the very least, we should inform the military advisor and ask for his opinion before making a decision, right? After struggling for a long time, the muscular man finally spoke. He respected the military counselor very much. Almost instinctively, he did not want to ruin the military counselor's plan. The military advisor is a Han, so I can understand why you agree with him. In fact, I have a lot of respect for the military advisor. He is a man of wisdom. However, you have to think this through. These soldiers will only need the time it takes for a few incense sticks to burn to cook. Send a message from here. The terrain is complex and difficult to traverse. You need to make a big detour. Going back and forth, they had already missed the timing. Unless you run straight from here and tell the counselor. But if we do that, we will definitely be discovered by the soldiers on the hillside. As long as they call out, they'll be prepared, and our efforts will be in vain. At that time, our whereabouts will be exposed, and it will be even easier for these people to escape. Hu Lang said. He narrowed his eyes slightly, and a beastly glint gleamed in them. The Turks on the grassland weren't as cultured as the Han, and they weren't as meticulous in their thinking. But the Turks weren't fools, especially when it came to war. In fact, Hu Lang was one of the few Turks who possessed exceptional intelligence in war. Even the bandit leader Iron Cloak Lee had nothing but praise for him. If it weren't for the fact that he was favored and valued, he wouldn't have been chosen as the leader of this mission, leading his brothers to carry out the mission of outflanking the rear. In fact, in the Iron Cloak Highwayman, other than Iron Cloak Lee and Joan, he was undoubtedly the third in command. Regardless of whether it was his valiance, bravery, or his ability to grasp opportunities, he was highly respected by his brothers. Chang Dao, you have two choices at the moment. The first is for us to circle to their rear and cut off their escape route. Just as the military advisor said, we'll wait for an opportunity to surround them and cut off their escape route. This way, we'll be safe, but we won't be able to launch a surprise attack. By then, they'll already be fighting with our brothers, and our role will only be to surround them. By then, all of the soldiers will be dead, but our brothers will also suffer heavy losses. For the military advisor to instruct us to circle around their rear and take such a huge detour, it's a testament to their fighting prowess. The second choice is for us to launch an attack right now. You can send a signal to the military advisor and have him attack together with us. On top of that, in order to prevent the other scattered soldiers from escaping, I'll send a group of 30 soldiers to the rear. I can specially select a team of 30 people to go around to the back and guard the official road, cutting off their escape route. As soon as any soldiers appear, we'll immediately shoot them down. This is the safest choice we have at the moment. This way, we'll suffer the least casualties. They'll suffer the greatest blow. However, we'll defy the military advisor's orders. Chang Dao, make your choice. Hu Lang turned to the burly man beside him. Regardless of whether they were to fight or not, they had to be on the same page before any operation could be carried out. This was the rule of the Iron Cloak Highwayman. The burly man didn't say a word, but a myriad of emotions flickered across his face. The military advisor's orders and the golden opportunity before him flashed through his mind. Finally, he gritted his teeth and made his decision. Let's do as you say. Even though he was defying the military advisor's orders, there was one thing that Hu Lang wasn't wrong about. The soldiers were indeed at their weakest at the moment. Attacking them at this time, from a high vantage point, and with the warhorses at their best speed, was indeed the way to pay the smallest price. Chang Dao, congratulations on making the wisest decision. Hu Lang chuckled, as though he had expected Chang Dao to make such a decision. Pulling on the reins, Hu Lang turned around and retreated to the back of the thorny bush. Brothers, prepare yourselves. Behind the dense thistles and thorns were numerous stallions, and mounted on the backs of these stallions were highwaymen. Each and every one of them had a ferocious expression on their faces and powerful auras, and the veins on their temples were bulging out. Beneath their steeds were rings of true martial realm halos. Kill! A moment later, the earth trembled, the forest howled, and the horses galloped. 70 to 80 true martial realm highwaymen leaped down from the peak of the mountain like ferocious tigers. The steep slope maximized the speed of the steeds. In just a short 20 to 30 zhang, the steeds were able to reach an astonishing speed. Hong long long, a cloud of dust billowed, and the ground trembled under the hooves of the steeds. 50 zhang, 70 zhang. In just an instant, the highwaymen had already covered more than half of the distance, and their speed was still increasing. At the same time, the Tang dynasty soldiers at the foot of the mountain couldn't even react in time. Brothers, kill them all. The military advisor said that they still have several million taels of gold on them. Don't let them escape. Kill them. A cloud of dust, mixed with fallen leaves and grass, soared into the clouds. The highwaymen howled and shrieked in excitement at the prospect of an intense battle. Wang Chong was able to use his steed to charge forward and forward on the main road, maximizing the might of the Tang dynasty's cavalry to its limits, and the highwaymen were able to do the same as well. When the highwaymen, whose speed was stacked to the maximum, charged down, even if there was a boulder in front of them, they would still be able to smash it apart. Needless to say, the bodies of flesh and blood at the bottom of the mountain. From the very start of the battle, the highwaymen were already standing on the side of victory. Reporting, we've discovered that those bandits are cooking on the main road. At the same time, far away behind the highwaymen and highwaymen, a burly highwayman scout walked through the crowd and reported to the military advisor. Zhouan reporting. Lord Hu Lang and Lord Chang Dao have sent word that they've discovered that the enemy is cooking on the fire, and they are preparing to launch a surprise attack to defeat them. We hope that the military advisor can cooperate with us. At this moment, the other highwayman leaped down from his steed and appeared before Iron Cloak Li and Zhouan. The two reports arrived almost at the same time, one after the other. What? Upon hearing the news, Zhouan's face immediately warped in horror. This wasn't the order that he had relayed. However, before he could react, he heard an earth-shattering battle cry. The sound was so deafening that it could be heard even from far away. For a moment, Zhouan was dumbfounded. Too fast. Everything had happened too quickly, and it wasn't in his plans at all. Zhouan, what should we do next? Iron Cloak Li was also taken aback. He had heard of the military advisor's plans, but the sight before him was clearly different from what the military advisor had told him. Hu Lang and Chang Dao had clearly disrupted his tempo, but Hu Lang and Chang Dao were his old subordinates, and he believed that they had their own reasons for doing so. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment, and Zhouan's mind was in turmoil. Without a doubt, a variable had appeared. The enemy was cooking on the fire. It was precisely because Hu Lang and Chang Dao noticed this that they changed their plans. Even Zhouan couldn't blame them for launching a surprise attack, while the enemy was cooking on the fire. Let me ask you, when you were scouting ahead, did you smell the scent of food? Zhouan suddenly asked. The highwayman scout was taken aback. He didn't expect the military advisor to ask such a question. I didn't get too close, so I didn't smell anything. This is bad. That lad is too cunning. Hu Lang and the others have fallen for his trap. Hearing those words, Zhouan's face turned ashen. Chief, we need to hurry up and lead our men to attack them, or else it'll be too late. The rest of you, surround the soldiers on the slope. Whether we can help Hu Lang and the others, or not will depend on this. Zhouan said anxiously. What? Chapter 351. Iron Cloak Li had never doubted Zhouan's words. More importantly, they were all elites under his command, and most of them were true martial realm experts. It wasn't easy to gather such experts. Jaya, without any hesitation, Iron Cloak Li leaped up from the boulder and landed on the back of his crimson Fergana steed. Squeezing his legs together, Iron Cloak Li crossed a distance of 7 to 8 zhang and charged out of the encirclement. Fire Slave and Poison Wirem, bring your men and follow me. The rest of you, attack the soldiers on the slope. His voice boomed like a peal of thunder, leaving Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others dumbfounded. No one knew what was going on, but they knew that something big must have happened among the Iron Cloak highwaymen. What happened? Huang Yongtu asked in panic. He wasn't deaf. How could a deaf person not hear the loud voice of the leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen? Don't bother too much about it. They are about to launch an attack. Everyone be careful. Zhang Lin exclaimed in alarm. The disparity in numbers was simply too great, and there was a limit to what they could do. Wang. All over the mountains and plains, the bandits that were as vast as the sea became restless again. On the slope, the 26 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty swiftly got into formation. After so many intense battles, they had come up with an effective strategy to deal with the highwaymen. Even if they couldn't defeat the highwaymen in the end, they would surely be able to make them pay a heavy price. On the other side, Iron Cloak Li waved his hands grandly and mobilized his most elite troops to charge toward the main road. Zhou senses were sharp, and Iron Cloak Li's movements weren't slow either. However, in this chaotic battle that was less than a few hundred feet away from each other, where they schemed against each other and were precise down to the millisecond, the victor was not them. Just as Iron Cloak Li reached the corner of the main road, he suddenly heard a deafening roar. Kill! The deafening roar came from the forest to the right of the main road, and in an instant, a powerful gust of wind blew, causing the trees in the mountain range to tremble. Hung long long. The earth trembled. Countless birds were startled and soared into the sky from the forest. At that moment, everyone clearly felt as if thousands of steel torrents were pouring down from the right side of the mountain peak, sweeping towards them. Not good. Hearing the commotion, Iron Cloak Li's face warped in horror. He immediately slapped the rear of his steed and galloped toward the center of the commotion. The troops led by Hu Lang and Saber had already dived down from the mountain. There was no doubt that the second wave of troops would not be them. Since it wasn't them, there was no doubt that it could only be the Tang dynasty's official army, led by that young boy in the training camp. At this moment, Iron Cloak Li's heart was burning with anxiety. Iron Cloak Li could only hope that Hu Lang, Chang Dao, and the others would be able to hold on for a little longer. However, Iron Cloak Li's hopes were just wishful thinking. Not good. We've been tricked. On the main road, the warhorse galloped through the thin layer of green smoke at lightning speed, and with a single slash, it sliced the great Tang cavalryman standing on the main road into two. Almost immediately, Hu Lang realized that he had fallen into a trap. Those indistinct figures shrouded in green smoke weren't the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, but his brothers who had been killed by the official army. Wooden spears pierced through the bodies of the steeds, stacking them together with the corpses of the highwaymen, on top of them firmly on the main road. The green smoke that pervaded the air wasn't fireworks for cooking, but firewood that was purely used to deceive them and lure them. The official army had used the smoke to create an illusion that they were cooking, thus attracting their attacks. Not good. Retreat! Retreat! At this moment, Hu Lang's heart turned cold. He didn't expect the official army to be so cunning. He thought that it was a surprise attack, but it turned out to be a trap. Hung long long. Kill! Hu Lang wanted to stop the bandits, but it was already too late. One after another, the highwaymen charged into the green smoke and sliced the official army in two. The highwaymen, who had been yearning for battle and slaughter, couldn't hear Hu Lang's voice at all. But as soon as they landed on the main road, the speed that they had built up from the mountain peak was reduced to nothing. At this moment, they had lost all of their advantages. In fact, in order to prevent the official army from escaping, Hu Lang even sent 20 to 30 men to the back of the main road, placing himself at a disadvantage. Hung long long. Just as Hu Lang was feeling extremely anxious, he heard a loud rumble. A huge iron spear wrapped in destructive power pierced towards him from the right side of the smoke with the speed of lightning. The speed of that spear was simply too fast. Almost at the same time that Hu Lang saw it, it had already arrived in front of him. It was only a few feet away. Ha! At this crucial moment, Hu Lang bellowed. His stellar energy burst forth, and a green halo of thorns appeared in his body. It spun rapidly, producing a metallic clatter. Boom! With just a single strike, Hu Lang had managed to send the great Tang cavalryman and his steed flying with his overwhelming strength. Even so, the webbing between his thumb and forefinger still trembled violently, and his wrist went numb. In terms of pure strength, the Tang dynasty cavalryman wasn't a match for him at all. However, When a Tang dynasty cavalryman and steed charged down from the top of the mountain, their speed could no longer be measured in terms of pure strength. This is bad. Even though Hu Lang had managed to send a Tang dynasty cavalryman flying with a single strike, he didn't feel the slightest bit of joy. Instead, his heart sank. This was because the second spear was already flying toward him at lightning speed. The speed of the spear was so fast that it left a long white trail behind it. Turks, pay with your life. Amidst the thin mist, a Tang dynasty cavalryman and steed leaped down from the top of the mountain. His eyes were sharp as lightning. Even Hu Lang was secretly shocked by the power of that attack. They were both riding horses, but the horsemanship of the Tang dynasty cavalryman was completely different from that of the highwayman. Boom! Hu Lang raised his fist and punched out. His stellar energy condensed into a green wolf's head, and he barely managed to knock the second Tang dynasty cavalryman off course. But soon the third and fourth spear arrived at the same time. Behind each spear was a cavalryman of the Tang dynasty, who had pushed his speed and strength to the limit. This time, Hu Lang wasn't able to dodge anymore. The combined strength of his steed left him wide open. Pupiu! 2 spears pierced into his chest from the left and right. By the time the black spears came out from his back, they were already stained with blood. The last thing Hu Lang saw was a streak of sword light circling in the air and descending from above. I'll be taking this head. The cold voice of a lady sounded in his ears. Hu Lang's vision went dark, and he lost consciousness. Pung! The head fell to the ground. Bai Xiling stood behind Hu Lang, her figure graceful and elegant. Her sword was still extended in her right hand. Naturally, the one who cut off Hu Lang's head was Bai Xiling. Bai Xiling had long seen that Hu Lang was able to send a Tang dynasty cavalryman flying with a single punch. Without a doubt, he was the leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. After all, Bai Xiling was much stronger than the other cavalrymen. For cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, and Bai Xiling had charged down from the peak of the mountain. Even Hu Lang could barely stand against such a formation. Xiling, hurry up and get back on the horse. Don't engage in melee combat on the ground. Wang Chong's stern voice came from the back of the horse, as a figure passed him like the wind. He didn't use his iron spear either. Instead, he flicked his 10 fingers, and streams of extremely condensed and dense sword qi crisscrossed in the air. Wang Chong's cultivation hadn't even reached true martial realm yet. However, Wang Chong didn't rely on his martial realm to kill his enemies. Instead, he relied on his vast martial arts skills and experience. In terms of martial arts skills and experience, no one here could match up to him. On the other hand, Wang Chong made full use of the thin green mist in the surroundings. His elusive sword qi of massacre complemented the green mist, and every time, there would be a highwayman who was caught off guard. His sword qi would pierce through their bodies and cause them to fall from their steeds. In a battle between cavalrymen, falling from their steeds meant death. Got it? Bai Xiling stuck out her tongue. Even though she was older than Wang Chong, old enough to be his elder sister, she couldn't help but act like a little girl in front of Wang Chong. Bai Xiling was filled with admiration for Wang Chong for this ambush. The Iron Cloak highwaymen had actually prepared a backup plan. If not for Wang Chong's sharp wits, they might have really been wiped out. But Wang Chong's ingenious chimney smoke not only managed to lure out the highwaymen, he even managed to catch them off guard. Those who wanted to ambush them ended up being ambushed instead. The Iron Cloak highwaymen had suffered heavy losses this time around. Nay! Bai Xiling grabbed the saddle and easily got onto the back of her steed. This was something she had learned from the other cavalrymen. Hiya! Bai Xiling squeezed her steed's abdomen and charged into the fray with her sword in hand. Boom! 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 Rings of light clashed with one another, producing a metallic clang. The air around them exploded, and shockwaves spread several zhang away. The neighing of Nei's steed, the cries of agony, and the sounds of collisions echoed in the air. The Iron Cloak highwaymen on the main road outnumbered Wang Chong's. But the moment they stopped on the main road, it meant that they had already lost the battle. Against the Tang dynasty cavalrymen charging down from the top of the mountain, not a single highwayman was able to stop them. In just the first wave, Wang Chong and the others had managed to kill more than 30 true martial realm highwaymen and scatter them in one fell swoop. Chapter 352. Hong Long Long. Dust billowed into the air as the 40 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen charged forward. In just a few rounds, they had already torn apart the true martial realm highwaymen, leaving the ground littered with corpses. The charge of a cavalry did not advocate individual combat. Instead, it relied on the strength of a group to bring out its full potential. As such, as long as the highwaymen were in a straight line, they would not be facing a single Tang Dynasty cavalryman, but an endless horde of cavalrymen. The strength of an individual was insignificant before the might of a group. Retreat! Retreat! Chang Dao's voice sounded incomparably despairing amidst the smoke and dust. He was slightly luckier than Hu Lang, having managed to dodge the first wave of the cavalry charge. But after witnessing the might of the charge of 40 cavalrymen, Chang Dao realized that he had underestimated the situation. The highwaymen were no match for the well-trained cavalrymen of the Imperial Army. When the 40 cavalrymen charged down from the peak of the mountain like a torrent of steel, even Chang Dao felt his heart tremble in fear, not daring to face them head-on. Even he wouldn't be able to last more than a few blows from such a torrent of steel. We can't hold them off anymore. Brothers, hurry up and retreat. Chang Dao's heart was filled with anxiety, and his forehead was drenched in sweat. However, Chang Dao's thoughts were still too naive. After a few attempts, all of the true martial realm Iron Cloak highwaymen had already begun fleeing for their lives without his orders. Some of them charged in the direction of the bandits around the corner, some to the east of the main road, and some to the left and right of the mountain. In any case, they were like headless flies, fleeing for their lives in a panic. The might of a cavalry charge was simply too great. There was no stalemate or intense battle at all, for the 5 cavalrymen maintained their formation and charged forward, killing one highwayman after another in an instant. 80 elites of the Iron Cloak highwaymen collapsed in an instant. This was the true meaning of a crushing defeat. Brat! I'll kill you! Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering boom came from afar like a clap of thunder. The tremendous power contained in the sound even caused the thick smoke and dust to explode. The entire mountain forest trembled under this thunderous roar that was filled with anger. In the blink of an eye, Wang Chong turned his head around and saw a burly man over 8 feet tall, riding a Fergana horse 2,000 feet away. He was riding on a Fergana horse, leaving a long trail of white air behind him, as if he had gone mad. On the hooves of the Fergana horse beneath him, 5 true martial realm halos of the same color and ring vibrated rapidly, emitting a metallic sound. Everywhere they passed, the gravel and grass were all shattered into pieces. That aura was unstoppable and invincible. Even a few hundred meters away, that astonishing aura could be felt. What should we do? Have they rushed over? So fast. Bai Siling turned to look at Wang Chong. In their plans, the Iron Cloak highwaymen would surely rush over to reinforce them, but it was impossible for them to arrive so quickly, not to mention that their leader, Iron Cloak Li, had appeared. Not only so, something has happened on the other side of the road as well. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu are also under attack. Listen. Ma Song also reined in his steed. He hadn't paid much attention to it during the battle, but now that he was paying close attention, he could hear the deafening battle cries coming from the other side of the road. Without a doubt, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had also launched an attack on Su Gan and Huang Yongtu while they were ambushing them. The other party had reacted swiftly, and the situation was starting to turn disadvantageous for them. Iron Cloak Li was swiftly approaching. Standing on the official road, Wang Chong's long hair fluttered in the wind as his heart pounded furiously. Zhouan. This was the only person Wang Chong could think of. To be able to come up with such a plan that allowed Iron Cloak Li to rush over so quickly and launch an attack immediately, Wang Chong could only think of the military advisor of the Iron Cloak highwaymen, Zhouan. Thus, the slightest error could lead to a huge error. Execute the second plan, Wang Chong said without any hesitation. But what about Su Gan and Huang Yongtu? Ma Song asked anxiously. There's nothing we can do. They can only depend on themselves. This is a hopeless situation, but at the very least, We've managed to lure out the main force of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Even though the remaining bandits and highwaymen outnumber them, their fighting prowess isn't as high as before. Given their capabilities, there's still hope for them to break out of the encirclement. God helps those who help themselves. They can't put all their hopes on us. Ma Song, release the whistling arrow and inform Zhang Lin and the others to prepare to break out. Wang Chong said. That wasn't what Wang Chong had planned. However, there was nothing on the battlefield that was immutable. A truly outstanding commander didn't carry out a plan meticulously, but to adapt to the situation and find the best way to deal with the enemy. Even though the situation had changed, it was still effective for Wang Chong. In the next instant, a whistling arrow whistled through the air, heading straight for Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Signal. Almost at the same time, upon hearing the agreed-upon signal, Zhang San straightened his back and his spirits rose. Wang Chong had said that as long as they heard the whistling arrow, they should prepare to break out of the encirclement. He would find a way to delay the main force of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Even though he had no idea how Wang Chong did it, and he had no idea why he was so confident that he could delay Iron Cloak Li and his men, so that they wouldn't be able to retreat in time. But without a doubt, this was the content of the white cloth that Bai Siling had shot out previously. Brothers, abandon the fortifications and prepare to break out of the encirclement. Zhang Lin shouted. Nay! In the next moment, the neighing of war steeds could be heard as they charged out of the fortifications. The long-awaited sound of a war steed galloped across the hill once more. Everyone, listen to my command. There's still a group of elite highwaymen at the back of the main road, and it's impossible to save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Charge together and kill the highwaymen at the back to exact vengeance for Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Wang Chong suddenly unsheathed his sword and pointed behind him. Yes, hearing that they couldn't save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, the eyes of the highwaymen reddened, and killing intent surged from their bodies. Hong Long Long. Under Wang Chong's command, the 40 Tang Dynasty soldiers spread out and charged toward the main road in the east. The formation of the army was scattered, but not disorderly. Bastard! Hearing those words, Iron Cloak Li felt like his lungs were going to explode. Even though he hadn't participated in the operation personally, based on his understanding of Hu Lang, he knew that what Wang Chong said was true. There was definitely another group of brothers at the back of the main road. This ambush had cost at least 40 to 50 of his true martial realm subordinates, and Iron Cloak Li's heart was bleeding at this moment. If Wang Chong were to kill those elites at the back as well, the entire Iron Cloak highwaymen would be doomed. Back then, Iron Cloak Li had put in a lot of effort to gather these true martial realm brothers. This was the culmination of more than a decade of his efforts. If Wang Chong were to succeed, his many years of hard work would have been for naught. At this moment, Iron Cloak Li was starting to regret underestimating Zhang Xian too much. If only he had known that he would suffer such heavy losses, he would have killed that lad personally, even at the risk of exposing himself and letting some of the soldiers escape. To think that 40 men would be able to kill so many of his men, this was a huge blow that he had never suffered before. Everyone listen to my orders and move together with me. Anyone who dares to escape will be killed without mercy. Iron Cloak Li's face darkened, and his furious roar echoed throughout the main road. Hong Long Long. The stampede of the war steeds caused all of the fleeing highwaymen to feel stifled, and they quickly merged into the crowd behind Iron Cloak Li. With Iron Cloak Li's appearance, the scattered highwaymen finally regained their morale. In the Iron Cloak highwaymen, Iron Cloak Li represented absolute strength, and there was no one who could stand against him. Follow the leader and kill those soldiers. Avenge our brothers. The highwaymen roared with courage once more. In fact, their morale was even higher than before. This time, other than the bandits they had relied on, the entire corps of the Iron Cloak highwaymen had been mobilized. With the 30 fleeing highwaymen and the 60 or so bandits behind Iron Cloak Li, the number of highwaymen had risen to 90. But unlike before, other than the elites of the Iron Cloak highwaymen, Iron Cloak Li was also mobilizing himself. Hong Long Long. Under Iron Cloak Li's lead, the morale of the bandits and highwaymen was greatly boosted, and the killing intent they exuded caused even the air to distort. Chase after them. Don't let them get away. A group of people with murderous intent followed closely behind him. This time, they wouldn't let them off no matter what. Unlike before, after several hundred zhang of galloping, the highwaymen had already pushed their speed to the limit. Their steeds were even faster than Wang Chong and the others. 100 zhang, 80 zhang, 70 zhang. The distance was getting shorter and shorter. Hung long. But just as they were about 50 zhang away, something happened. Iron Cloak Li suddenly felt the ground beneath his feet buckling, and the ground beneath him suddenly caved in. This is bad. Alarmed, Iron Cloak Li immediately realized that he had fallen into a trap. He tried to rein in his steed, but it was already too late. When a steed's speed reached its limit, how could it possibly stop at a whim? Hung long. With a deafening explosion and the neighing of a steed, Iron Cloak Li and his steed fell from the sky amidst a cloud of dust. Beneath him, a huge pit had appeared out of nowhere, and it was filled with wooden stakes. Chief, not good. There's a trap ahead. Hurry up and stop. That someone tried to rein in his steed and stop the bandits behind him, but it was already too late. Even Iron Cloak Li's Fergana steed was unable to stop under such circumstances, let alone the bandits behind him. Nay. Chapter 353. Now's the time. From afar, Wang Chong could hear the continuous sounds of bodies falling to the ground and the neighing of war steeds. He knew that his plan had succeeded. Dual arrow formation. Charge. As soon as he said those words, the 40 war steeds came to a halt, and a deathly silence descended upon the world. However, this extreme silence gave off an extremely uneasy and austere feeling. Hung long. The earth rumbled. 42 warhorses' manes fluttered in the wind as they neighed at the same time. In the blink of an eye, they turned around and formed into 2 arrow formations at the speed of lightning, shooting towards the direction behind the pit. Hung long. With a deafening rumble, the 42 steeds formed into a dual arrow formation and charged right into the chaotic midst of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. No one could describe the impact of this collision. Countless highwaymen were sent flying, and some of their massive war steeds even collapsed. Be careful. The Imperial Army is here. Stop them. Shrill cries filled with extreme fear echoed across the entire path. Looking at the young figure at the very front of the group, fear and panic surfaced in the eyes of the highwaymen. That person. It was that young man from the Imperial Army again. At this point, close to 300 of his brothers had already died under the hands of the Tang dynasty's Imperial Army, and this included respected leaders like Hu Lang. Yet despite the repeated battles, the casualties that he had suffered were negligible. At this moment, even the most ferocious, cruel, and fearless highwayman would feel a deep sense of fear upon seeing the cavalry led by that young man. Hung long. Blood splattered everywhere, and severed limbs flew in the air. Just like before, Wang Chong's cavalry easily pierced through the group of highwaymen from the front to the back. What was different from before was that this time, there were 2 dual arrow formations piercing through them simultaneously. The war steeds and highwaymen were sent flying one after another, and a bone-chilling screech echoed across the entire path. Once, twice, the 2 vanguard arrow cavalrymen pierced through the gathered horse bandits repeatedly at an astonishing speed. The same scene repeated itself, and the horse bandits who had just gathered their morale collapsed once more. Furthermore, it was in front of an opponent who outnumbered them by a lot. Cavalry charges never required the same number of troops as the opponent. As long as they repeatedly penetrated the opponent's formation, dealt a blow to the opponent's morale, and messed up the opponent's formation, all they had to do next was harvest. Wang Chong had spent his entire life on the battlefield, and had been a grand marshal of the army. He had commanded countless cavalry troops, so he was very clear about the charging characteristics of cavalry. On the battlefield, if the cavalry was used well, it would be an army of death that could reap lives in large swathes. They were just a bunch of highwaymen. They didn't even know the art of war, let alone the art of commanding cavalrymen. Success! Looking at the scattered highwaymen, Bai Siling was overjoyed. If it was before today, she would never have believed that she could face such a large number of opponents. Moreover, he could fight and survive. This was Bai Siling's first time witnessing the terrifying power of cavalry. This experience left an indelible impression on her for the rest of her life. This is great. Gongzi, you've succeeded. Ma Song's excitement and joy were similarly indescribable. As a veteran who had served in the army for more than a decade, Ma Song had followed many different commanders and participated in many battles. The battle with the highwaymen before him couldn't be considered as the most intense and dangerous battle he had ever experienced. In the midst of an intense battlefield, he could easily find countless battles that were far more dangerous than this one. No matter how powerful the highwaymen were, they couldn't compare to a regular army. But without a doubt, none of the commanders had left a deeper impression on him than the young man before him. To use 40 cavalrymen to fight against a group of highwaymen 10 times their number, while sustaining minimal casualties. None of the commanders Ma Song had ever met could compare to the young man before him. The young man before him was extremely familiar with the tactics of cavalry. The might of 40 cavalrymen had been brought to full play under his command. In fact, Ma Song felt that there was no commander in the entire Tang dynasty who could bring out the might of cavalry better than Wang Chong. Hong Long Long. It was a crushing defeat. The cavalrymen led by Wang Chong didn't fight one-on-one. Instead, they gathered their superior strength and formed a formation to strike at the highwaymen repeatedly. Most of the time, the highwaymen weren't facing a single cavalryman, but a group of cavalrymen. Such a tactic allowed them to defeat their opponents easily, and it also minimized the damage suffered by the cavalrymen to the minimum. Thus, even though the cavalrymen led by Wang Chong had suffered some casualties, they didn't suffer any casualties at all. In the eyes of others, such an outcome was simply like a miracle. It was unbelievable. But to Wang Chong, it couldn't be any more natural. Lad, do you think that you've won? Just as everyone was immersed in their joy, a fearsome voice that seemed to have come from the depths of hell suddenly echoed in everyone's ears. Everyone who heard this voice felt a bone-chilling coldness, as well as a strong sense of danger and unease. In that instant, even the air seemed to have frozen over. Wang. It was also at this moment, through the billowing dust, in the deep pit in front of them, everyone saw a tall and muscular silhouette, as strong as a giant elephant. The air that was mixed with dust twisted around him. Everyone who saw him could feel the thick and terrifying killing intent that was not concealed in the slightest. And what was even more unforgettable was the pair of cold, chilly eyes filled with killing intent in the dust. They didn't look like the eyes of a human, but more like the eyes of a demon. Not good. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Almost instinctively, he felt a great sense of danger. Everyone be careful. However, what was even faster than Wang Chong's voice was that demon-like silhouette. Nay! The warhorse neighed. No one knew how that person moved. They only knew that when they saw him, he had already appeared beside a cavalryman of the Tang dynasty, like an extremely dangerous beast. His steel-like shoulders contained boundless power, as he ruthlessly slammed into the warhorse. The warhorse, which was as tall as a man and had a sturdy body and dense muscles, was almost instantly smashed into pieces by the explosive force. Along with the warhorse, the rider on the back of the warhorse was also smashed into pieces. Hong Long. Blood and broken pieces of flesh burst forth in all directions like a fountain. Everyone was dumbfounded by this blow, including Wang Chong. This was the first time Wang Chong's subordinates had suffered a casualty since the start of the battle with the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Not to mention, both the man and his steed were crushed to smithereens. Iron Cloak Li's attack was simply too powerful. It didn't seem like something a human could do at all. Little Li. A sorrowful howl echoed in the air as a cavalryman suddenly left the formation and charged toward Iron Cloak Li like a madman. Humph, you're courting death. The cold voice was cold and emotionless. There was no surprise at all. Hong Long. In just a single strike, the Tang dynasty cavalryman and his steed were sent flying more than 10 zhang into the air. That terrifying strength gave people an unprecedented feeling of impact. Everyone was dumbfounded. This was the first time the leader of the Iron Cloak highwaymen had made a move, and he had already displayed unparalleled strength. Be careful. Don't leave the formation. Charge forward. Wang Chang's anxious voice echoed across the sky. This was the first time he was witnessing Iron Cloak Li's strength, and it was even more fearsome than what Li Tsangqi had described to him. Da-da-da. The first to move was the formation that Bai Xiling and Ma Song were in. They were the closest to Iron Cloak Li, so they were the first to move. Kill! 21 cavalrymen of Great Tang formed an arrow formation, and like a massive steel dragon, they charged toward Iron Cloak Li, leaving a trail of dust in their wake. Humph humph humph. Iron Cloak Li sneered coldly as he looked at the incoming cavalryman, showing no intention of dodging at all. In his chest, there was a ball of rage burning. His killing intent felt as if it would tear the heavens apart. His many years of painstaking effort had been destroyed by Wang Chang's group of 40. In fact, even he himself was trapped in the pit dug by Wang Chong. Even the Fergana steed that had followed him for so many years had been impaled by a wooden stake in the pit, losing its life. Ever since he founded the Iron Cloak Highwayman, Iron Cloak Li had never suffered such humiliation, let alone such a grievous blow. That darn brat! Iron Cloak Li clenched his fists tightly, and the veins on his forehead bulged one after another. His intense rage caused his eyes to turn crimson. That was because his eyes were bloodshot. If looks could kill, Wang Chong and these cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty would have died many times over. Up till now, Iron Cloak Li's men had already lost more than 300 men. At the same time, his killing intent and rage had also reached a peak. Today, no matter what price he had to pay, he would kill Wang Chong and these 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty. Nay! Amidst a cloud of dust, the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty were getting closer and closer to him. The rumbling of the hooves caused even his clothes to flutter. But Iron Cloak Li had no intention of retreating at all. Not only that, he even stood before the Tang dynasty cavalrymen and slowly closed his eyes. Hung long long. Time seemed to have slowed down innumerable times. And before countless gazes, a pair of powerful hooves pierced through the smoke and dust, striking heavily against Iron Cloak Li's chest like a mountain. When the hooves struck against Iron Cloak Li's body, a deafening metallic reverberation sounded. Iron Cloak Li stood in front of the pit like an immovable mountain, and the cavalrymen charging at him were repelled by the force of the impact. Wang! At this moment, everyone was stunned. How is this possible? Chapter 354. To think that a body of flesh and blood would actually be able to withstand the full might of a true martial realm cavalryman. And on top of that, he was able to withstand the full might of a true martial realm cavalryman. If not for them witnessing it with their own eyes, they would have found it hard to believe. But all of this was happening right before their eyes. It's my turn. A cold voice filled with rage echoed in everyone's ears. But Iron Cloak Li had already vanished from everyone's sight. Pung! As if struck by an invisible hand, the first cavalryman was sent flying along with his steed, after which the second, third, and fourth cavalrymen followed suit. The sharpest arrow tip of the entire arrow formation, which should have been the one with the greatest power, was forcibly shattered and sent flying by someone's flesh and blood. The strong warhorses, which could crush stone tablets with their feet, let out mournful cries. Wherever they were hit, their bones and internal organs would collapse into the ground. With every punch, a well-trained warhorse that had been on the battlefield for a long time would be sent flying and killed. Boom! Iron Cloak Li single-handedly knocked back 5 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty and shattered the sharpest of the arrow formation. Then with a flicker, he appeared beside another cavalryman of the Tang dynasty and rammed his shoulder against Nei's steed, sending yet another cavalryman and his steed flying. Chi! With a bellow, a white streak of light flashed, and a 3 chi long sword flew toward Iron Cloak Li's head at an astonishing speed. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's face turned cold. Clang! But when the sharp sword struck Iron Cloak Li's body, it felt as if it had struck an invisible layer of steel, preventing the sword from piercing through his body. Iron Cloak Li pushed his palms forward. Boom! With a scream of agony, Bai Xiling was sent flying before crashing heavily into the ground, blood spurting from her mouth. Before the head of the Iron Cloak bandits, even a genius from Longwei training camp, like Bai Xiling, was no match for him. Xiling. Wang Chong turned pale with fright. He knew how high Bai Xiling's cultivation was. She was in existence on par with Marchioness Yi and cousin Wang Zhuyan. In just one move, Bai Xiling was severely injured. Iron Cloak Li's strength was truly frightening. Junior, be careful. His iron cloak is impervious to swords and blades. My sword can't hurt him. Bai Xiling propped herself up from the ground, her face as pale as paper. If not for her superior cultivation allowing her to protect her internal organs with her stellar energy, she would have died from that palm strike from Iron Cloak Li. Puff. As soon as Bai Xiling finished speaking, she felt a sweetness in her throat. Her qi and blood surged, and she spat out another mouthful of blood. Her heart was filled with even more fear. From the start of the battle until now, at least 5 cavalrymen and their steeds had died in the hands of this bandit leader. Even she herself had sustained severe injuries. This kind of loss was unprecedented. Iron Cloak Li's strength was simply too frightening. Little lass, it seems like you are quite concerned about that lad. After I kill that lad, I'll kill you as well. Today, all of you will die. Iron Cloak Li's killing intent surged as he single-handedly destroyed an arrow formation. Then, ignoring the others, he charged right for the second arrow formation that Wang Chong was in. Without any intention of dodging, Iron Cloak Li charged right for the sharpest and strongest point of the arrow formation. Hong Long. At least 5 spears carrying the might of a mountain struck Iron Cloak Li's body simultaneously from 5 different directions. However, all of the spears were blocked by the black iron cloak around Iron Cloak Li's body. The spears that could pierce through metal and fling a man and his steed into the air were completely ineffective against Iron Cloak Li's armor. Rise! Iron Cloak Li stood as firm as a mountain, but the 5 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty were flung away together with their steeds. Pung pung pung. Steeds were sent flying one after another. Many of them fell to the ground with their necks snapped, and some even had their innards ruptured. Nei's cries of agony lingered in the air. Lad die. A cold glint flashed across Iron Cloak Li's eyes as he stared at Wang Chong. As the instigator of all this, Iron Cloak Li placed all the blame on Wang Chong. If not for him, the cavalrymen wouldn't have been able to deal so much damage. If not for him, Hu Lang wouldn't have died, his beloved steed would still be alive, and his subordinates wouldn't have lost so many elites. How could Iron Cloak Li tolerate the destruction of his many years of hard work? He could spare any of the 40 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, but he had to get rid of this young man who had come from the training camps. So, with a flash of light, Iron Cloak Li raised his arm, and a black shadow shot out from his body. As if it had a life of its own, the black stellar energy cloak darted toward Wang Chong. Hong Long! With a deafening explosion, a cloud of dust rose from where the black cloak landed, and all the rocks in the area were reduced to dust. On the other hand, Wang Chong had managed to dodge the attack by a hair's breadth. The white-hoofed shadow's divine beauty, mysticism, and sensitivity to danger had saved Wang Chong's life at the crucial moment. Nay! Iron Cloak Li turned around and saw a cavalryman of the Tang dynasty charging toward him fearlessly while he was attacking Wang Chong. Iron Cloak Li sneered coldly. Boom! With a thought, the black stellar energy cloak flew up and expanded before falling from the sky, enveloping the cavalryman of the Tang dynasty along with his steed. Ka-cha-cha. With a series of cracking sounds, the Tang cavalryman wrapped in the black chainmail began to rapidly shrink, blood gushing out like a river. In the blink of an eye, the cavalryman of the Tang dynasty had been crushed into a ball of flesh, and he fell from the black cloak. Nay! Seeing this scene, the warhorses were frightened. They reared up and retreated. Wang Chong felt a chill run down his spine. If he had been just a little bit slower, he would have been the one reduced to a ball of flesh. Brat, you won't be able to escape. Iron Cloak Li stood motionlessly on the spot, but his cold and murderous eyes were locked onto Wang Chong. Who? Iron Cloak Li waved his hand, and the black stellar energy cloak descended from the sky to cover his body once more. There wasn't the slightest speck of blood on it. Chief is formidable. Chief! Chief! Upon seeing this sight, the Iron Cloak highwaymen who were fleeing in all directions were invigorated, and they began to cheer loudly. Let's go! Let's help Chief exterminate those soldiers. Brothers, it's time for vengeance. Chief, well done. Brothers, kill. The sound of galloping hooves could be heard from all directions, and the bandits, who had scattered like birds and beasts, let out excited cries as they charged back from all directions. The tables had suddenly turned, and the situation had become extremely disadvantageous to them. Iron Cloak Lee had single-handedly reversed the tides of the battle. Chief, we're here to help you. A ferocious and bloodthirsty roar sounded from afar. On the east side of the main road, a group of 30 Iron Cloak highwaymen swept up a cloud of dust as they charged toward Zhang Xian's direction. The 30 elite highwaymen that Hu Lang had stationed at the rear had finally heard the commotion and rushed over. Wang. In that instant, even Wang Chong's face warped in horror. Iron Cloak Lee, who was invulnerable to swords and spears, was already a difficult opponent to deal with. On top of that, the highwaymen who had retreated and the 30 elite highwaymen were also backing them up. The situation had become extremely disadvantageous to them. The worst thing was that this time, they were at a disadvantage, and even their escape route had been cut off. And after Iron Cloak Lee had destroyed the arrow formation, the most important factor of the Iron Cloak cavalry's charge was speed. Without the speed that they prided themselves on, they would be no different from infantry. In fact, they might even be inferior to infantry. In that instant, everyone could feel the heavy stench of death. The hurried galloping was like an invisible string that tugged at everyone's nerves. Lord, what do we do? A squad leader looked uneasily at Wang Chong, his eyes brimming with anxiety and expectation. Even a soldier like him, who didn't know the slightest about strategy, could sense danger from the current situation. Furthermore, it wasn't the danger of getting injured or dying, but the danger of the entire army being wiped out. Lord! Lord! Time seemed to have come to a halt at this instant. In Wang Chong's eyes, this short instant felt like an eternity. Wang Chong could see the corpses of the warhorses and the decapitated cavalrymen on the path. In the distance, Bai Siling was clutching her chest as she struggled to stand up. The immense pain and internal injury she had sustained had caused her beautiful face to warp in agony. Ma Song was also severely injured. The corpse of a warhorse was pressing down on his leg, and his eyebrows were tightly knitted together in pain. A true martial realm expert could easily lift up a warhorse, but Ma Song couldn't even lift his leg. Dust and sand filled the air, and fresh blood flowed freely on the grass on both sides of the path. In the distance, the highwaymen were charging over savagely, brandishing their swords and sabers. Even further away, the group of elite mounted gangsters who were hiding in ambush were also rushing over. And at the very center of all these troops, Iron Cloak Lee was currently sending a steed flying with a single punch. Like an insurmountable wall, Iron Cloak Lee stood right in front of Wang Chong, as well as everyone else. His cold gaze pierced through space and time, locking onto Wang Chong. Death followed him like a shadow. In a short period of time, Wang Chong had fallen into a perilous situation where his entire army was being wiped out. Everyone retreat! Hong Long! Wang Chong suddenly charged forward, and grabbing Bai Siling, he placed her on the back of his steed. At the same time, he issued the final and most important command of the entire battle. Execute the plan, 8 Claws Fishing the Moon. Chapter 355. Hong Long. In an instant, all of the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, who were charging toward Iron Cloak Lee, suddenly scattered in all directions. Every single one of the cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty chose a different direction. Even Wang Chong was fleeing together with them. Putting aside the Iron Cloak highwaymen, even Iron Cloak Lee was taken aback by this sudden turn of events. They are escaping. Don't let them get away. Stop them. Our leader is formidable. The highwaymen seemed to have been injected with a shot of adrenaline as they roared in excitement. Too powerful, too powerful. As expected of their leader, those formidable soldiers had killed countless of their brothers. And even Hu Lang was dead. Countless of their elite brothers had perished in battle as well. Yet their leader had single-handedly defeated all of them. He was no different from a god. Brothers, hurry up and charge. Let's help our leader kill them. The bloodthirst and killing intent in the hearts of the highwaymen was ignited. As highwaymen and bandits, even though they were in a disadvantageous position, they were unable to muster up the will to fight. But once they gained the upper hand, they would be able to bring out 120% of their fighting prowess. Kill! Their deafening roars caused the entire forest to tremble, and the highwaymen ran even faster. It seems like these fellows are still useful. Iron Cloakly looked at the highwaymen and bandits charging in from all directions, and heard the deafening roars, and his tightly knitted brows finally relaxed a little. Turning around to look at the fleeing cavalrymen, Iron Cloakly sneered coldly in his heart. Those fellows were way too naive to think that they could escape at this moment. Even though Hu Lang had misjudged the other party and fell for their trap, he had made the wrong move. The 30 elites had completely cut off the path of retreat of Wang Chong and the others. At this moment, the soldiers of the Tang dynasty were like turtles in a cage, and it was impossible for them to escape. Buzz! Just as Iron Cloakly was about to give chase, an abrupt turn of events occurred. Before everyone's astonished gazes, the cavalrymen who had already fled a dozen zhang away suddenly turned around simultaneously and charged toward Iron Cloakly. Boom! In an instant, the 30 warhorses' speed soared to the limit. 30 steeds and 30 cavalrymen charged at Iron Cloakly with all their might. Not only that, in the process of charging, the 30 warhorses began to change rapidly, and the originally disorderly troops began to show distinct echelons. Upon closer inspection, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a total of 8 echelons. Although the number of people in each echelon varied, it was still obvious that there were 8 echelons. Wang Chong himself also joined the echelon to make up for the loss of members in the echelon. What's going on? What are they doing? All of the highwaymen were stunned. The highwaymen thought that Wang Chong and the others had been intimidated by their leader and were preparing to escape. As such, their main objective was to surround them and stop them from escaping. But who could have thought that they would suddenly turn around and charge right back at them? What are you all waiting for? Hurry up, they want to make a move on our leader. Stop them and kill them all. A loud bellow suddenly broke the silence. Saber roared furiously as he whipped the butt of his steed and galloped forward. Of all of them, he was the only one who could sense the danger their leader was in. Without a doubt, these people were intending to make use of their advantage in numbers to deal with their leader. Even though 10 true martial realm brothers wouldn't be a match for their leader on the mountain, there were far more than just 10 true martial realm cavalrymen here. Hung Long Long, seated on the back of his steed, Wang Chong stared fixedly at Iron Cloakly, the head of the Iron Cloak bandits, standing before the pit. To shoot a man, one must first shoot the horse. To capture the bandits, one must first capture the leader. Wang Chong was well aware that the situation before him was one of certain death. Regardless of whether it was Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, or him and Bai Siling, they were all surrounded. Iron Cloakly had single-handedly turned the tides of the battle around. There was only one way to break out of this predicament and turn defeat into victory. Kill Iron Cloakly. Iron Cloakly was the crux to everything. As long as they could kill him, the morale of the highwaymen would crumble. All of the strength that they had attached themselves to Iron Cloakly would dissipate. The highwaymen were adept at taking advantage of others' misfortune and beating them down. If they were in an advantageous position, their fighting prowess might even surpass that of the official army. But if they were to fall into a disadvantageous position, their morale would crumble and they would scatter. It was impossible for the highwaymen to defend their honor and fight to the last man. Siling, are you ready? Wang Chong asked. I understand. Seated in front of Wang Chong, Bai Siling gritted her teeth as a sliver of determination flashed across her eyes. Even though Wang Chong didn't say it out loud, Bai Siling knew that they only had a single chance, and they didn't have much time left. This was the last chance to cut off all means of retreat. If they couldn't kill Iron Cloakly and the highwaymen were to surround them, only death would await them. Nay. The steeds neighed as the cavalrymen charged toward Iron Cloakly with an unwavering momentum. In that instant, the atmosphere had reached an unprecedented level, and the stench of despair permeated the air. I'll make sure that all of you give up on me. Iron Cloakly's cold voice was neither loud nor soft. but it was clearly resounding in everyone's ears. In the face of Yuma, who was charging at him like a torrent of steel, Iron Cloakly stood firmly like an immovable mountain, as a powerful aura burst forth from his body. If they thought that they could kill him with their advantage in numbers, he could only say that they were too naive. Wang. A black stellar energy cloak enveloped Iron Cloakly from head to toe, and the metallic buzzing reverberated ceaselessly, leaving one's heart palpitating. Come. With a cold glint in his eyes, before Wang Chang's cavalrymen could reach him, Iron Cloakly suddenly charged toward the first group of 5 cavalrymen and launched an attack. Hung long long. As though a massive boulder had smashed into the ground, Iron Cloakly and his stellar energy cloak crashed into the midst of the cavalrymen like a meteor. Boom! With a deafening explosion, the cavalrymen neighed in agony, and the steel spears shattered. In just a single strike, Iron Cloakly had defeated the first group of 5 cavalrymen led by Wang Chong. The immense force sent the 5 cavalrymen and their steeds flying into the air. Screams of agony and the neighs of the cavalrymen intertwined together, and fresh blood permeated the air. Many of the cavalrymen had their chests caved in, and even their bones were exposed. It was a tragic sight, but regardless of whether it was Wang Chong or the other cavalrymen, none of them hesitated upon seeing this sight. Life or death. This was the predicament placed in front of everyone, and it was also the only choice. They had to kill Iron Cloakly, or else they would suffer the same fate as the cavalrymen. You're overestimating yourselves. There's no way any of you are a match for me. Iron Cloakly's eyes were cold and savage. Boom! Before Wang Chong could charge over, Iron Cloakly had already charged toward another group of cavalrymen. Boom! Iron Cloakly's fist struck the side of the cavalryman's steed, piercing the armor protecting the side of the horse along with his fist. Fresh blood spurted out. After the boundless astral energy entered through the ribs, it shot out from the back of the rider on horseback. Amidst the screams of agony, fresh blood spurted from the gaping hole in the cavalryman's back, splattering all over Iron Cloakly's face. But that only served to further intensify the rage in his heart. This wasn't the first time he had killed an official of the royal court, but it was the most exciting and stimulating one he had ever done so far. The feeling of being in control of the entire situation was what one sought after the most. In fact, Iron Cloakly could feel that his Iron Cloak art was on the verge of achieving a breakthrough under the stimulation of his emotions. I'll kill every single one of you. That cold, sinister, and tyrannical voice came from Iron Cloakly's throat. Boom, boom, boom. Iron Cloakly used his shoulder, elbow, and fist simultaneously to send another 4 cavalrymen and their steeds flying. Let me kill every single one of you. Iron Cloakly's figure blurred as he charged toward another group of cavalrymen. His movement technique was extremely nimble, and he didn't stay on the spot at all. This made it impossible for Wang Chong to gather the strength of 30 cavalrymen to attack him at the same time. Iron Cloakly was confident in his strength, but he wasn't a fool. With his overwhelming strength and the Iron Cloak technique, as long as he didn't stay in the same spot, he could easily defeat Wang Chong one by one and kill them all. Hung long long. Just as Iron Cloakly was charging toward another group of cavalrymen, a sudden change occurred. Just several zhang away from Iron Cloakly, the group of cavalrymen suddenly made a sharp turn and charged in another direction. Even Iron Cloakly was taken aback by this unexpected turn of events. But an even more abrupt change occurred later on. In the instant that this group of cavalrymen disappeared, another group of cavalrymen suddenly appeared in Iron Cloakly's sight. In just an instant, a spear formation of 5 cavalrymen struck Iron Cloakly with all their might. Pung 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 pung. At the same time, 5 spears from the second row struck Iron Cloakly from another direction. Even though Iron Cloakly's position was constantly changing, the 10 spears and the 10 cavalrymen seemed to have been rehearsed countless times in advance, striking Iron Cloakly accurately from all directions. Chapter 356. Boom! Amidst a furious gale and stellar energy, the 10 spears struck Iron Cloakly simultaneously. Even with the protection of the black stellar energy Iron Cloak, Iron Cloakly was still jolted by the impact. and his face reddened to the point where fresh blood seemed to be seeping out from it. From the start of the battle, this was the first time Iron Cloak Li had shown any signs of strain. This is a good chance. Wang Chong's eyes lit up. Riding on the back of the white-hoofed shadow, Wang Chong and Bai Siling charged toward Iron Cloak Li. Hiss! With a roar, a white streak of light shot forward. Bai Siling had become one with her sword, and the halo of thorns around her vibrated intensely as she slashed down toward Iron Cloak Li's head. Boom, boom, boom. Amidst the intense tremors, time seemed to have come to a standstill. Iron Cloak Li's body swelled up, and veins bulged all over his 8-chi-tall body, revealing a look of pain on his face. Outside his body, however, the black chainmail, which had expanded to around 9 feet in size, continued to protect him like a fortress. Be it the full might of the 10 steeds, Wang Chong's charge, or Bai Siling's full-strength strike, none of them were able to do a thing to the black Iron Cloak Li. It's useless. You won't be able to pierce through my iron cloak. Ah! Iron Cloak Li's hoarse voice soon turned into a scream of agony. The sword case shattered, and with a cold gleam, a 3-chi-long sword inscribed with innumerable intricate patterns pierced through Iron Cloak Li's Iron Cloak Li and stabbed into Wang Chong's back. What kind of sword is this? No sword can pierce through my Iron Cloak Li's Iron Cloak Li. Iron Cloak Li's screams of agony reverberated in the air as the black Iron Cloak Li forcefully clamped down on Wang Chong's sword. Hung long. A black torrent of stellar energy abruptly burst forth from Iron Cloak Li's body, accompanied by a martial halo that seemed to be made of metal and metal. Boom, boom, boom. With a series of loud explosions, Wang Chong, Bai Siling, and the Tintang Dynasty cavalrymen were all blown away by the blast. Bang! Wang Chong was sent tumbling several times by the violent shockwave. He slammed his palm on the ground and used a few techniques to deflect the force of the shockwave before stabbing his sword into the ground. Only then did he manage to stabilize himself. But even so, he still felt a sweet taste in his throat, and the blood in his body surged. This guy is too powerful. Wang Chong's heart thumped rapidly. 10 cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty, along with him and Bai Siling, were actually unable to do anything to Iron Cloak Li. This kind of strength was enough to make people despair. Brat, what kind of sword is that in your hand? A bone-chilling voice filled with boundless killing intent suddenly sounded in Wang Chong's ears. Raising his head, he saw Iron Cloak Li's towering figure standing on the ground, glaring at him like a venomous snake. The reason why Iron Cloak Li dared to challenge the 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen, including Wang Chong, was because of his powerful iron cloak art. This cultivation technique created a stellar energy cloak that was impervious to swords and spears, as tough as metal. No matter how fanciful a martial art was, if it couldn't break through the Iron Cloak Li's stellar energy cloak, it would be nothing more than an embroidered pillow. Furthermore, the defensive prowess of the Iron Cloak Li far exceeded that of a true martial realm expert. Relying on this Iron Cloak Li's offensive and defensive prowess, he had already killed more than 10 Tang dynasty cavalrymen by Wang Chong's side, and all of them were killed along with their steeds. But just a moment ago, Iron Cloak Li's greatest trump card had been pierced through by a sword, and the sword had even pierced through his back. This was the first time such a situation had happened. Not even the treasured swords and sabers of the swordsmithing clans of the capital had been able to harm his stellar energy iron cloak. Even those top-class swords and sabers could only pierce through his stellar energy iron cloak, not pierce through it and stab deep into his back like Wang Chong's sword had. The effectiveness of the Iron Cloak Li had been weakened by at least 60%. For the first time, fear surfaced in Iron Cloak Li's eyes, but at the same time, he was determined to kill Wang Chong. He couldn't allow such a weapon to exist. At the very least, he couldn't allow it to appear in the hands of his enemy. However, Wang Chong paid no heed to Iron Cloak Li at all, as though he hadn't heard a single word. Everyone, dismount from your steeds and fend off the bandits with your steeds. Kill the Iron Cloak Bandit Chief. Wang Chong commanded grimly. The rumbling of the hooves of the Iron Cloak highwaymen was swiftly approaching them. It would only take a few seconds at most for the highwaymen to arrive, and the only thing that awaited them would be a crushing defeat and a complete wipeout. 80 experienced cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty would die humiliatingly in the hands of a bunch of bandits. But even at this moment, Wang Chong still didn't give up. He calmly issued his final command. Jaya! The training of the Tang dynasty army was on full display at this moment. All of the surviving cavalrymen carried out Wang Chong's orders perfectly. The 20 or so cavalrymen leaped down from their steeds and patted their steeds viciously, sending them galloping in all directions to obstruct the bandits who were charging in from all directions. Every batch of war horses of the Great Tang had undergone strict training, systematic selection, and then a long period of nurturing before being bred again. To a cavalryman, every single steed wasn't just a simple mount. They were companions, friends, and a part of their bodies. Unless one was facing death or retirement, no one would abandon their steed. Without their steeds, cavalrymen could no longer be called cavalrymen. Instead, they were infantrymen and warriors. However, there was another more important duty of a soldier, and that was to follow orders. Regardless of whether it was their steed or themselves, they were willing to give up anything for the sake of their goal. Dying in battle was the fate of a soldier, as well as their honor. Every single cavalryman who stepped onto the battlefield was prepared to face death at any moment. The situation in front of them no longer gave them the space to turn around and launch a second charge. Driving the steeds out to block the bandits was their only chance. But even so, it wasn't enough to stop them for too long. If they couldn't end the battle swiftly and kill Iron Cloak Li, everyone here would have to die. Wang Chong's actions might seem risky, but it was the best decision he could make at this moment. Wang. As soon as the 20 cavalrymen landed on the ground, they charged toward Iron Cloak Li. Seeing that Wang Chong was ignoring him, Iron Cloak Li couldn't help but fly into a rage. You want to die? Fine, I'll grant you your wish. Iron Cloak Li's face darkened, and a savage glint flickered in his eyes. As a bandit who made a living through robbery, which one of them didn't make a name for themselves through slaughter? In fact, Iron Cloak Li even dared to kill soldiers. Wang. A halo extended from beneath Iron Cloak Li's feet, followed by a second, a third, a fourth. A total of 5 identical true martial realm halos extended from beneath Iron Cloak Li's feet, illuminating the surroundings, making Iron Cloak Li look like a god of war. True martial realm 5 Dan. The 5 identical concentric halos of thorns were a clear indication of Iron Cloak Li's true cultivation. Upon reaching the true martial realm, one would be able to form a halo that harnessed the laws of the world and possessed unique effects. As the strength of the halo increased, it would split into a halo of the same attribute every time it advanced to a higher level. Such a halo could reach a maximum of 9 tiers. The more halos there were, the greater the strength and speed one possessed, and the more powerful the laws of the world would be. Iron Cloak Li's 5 halos had already surpassed most of the Tang dynasty cavalrymen, and it was more than enough to crush them. Roar! Roaring furiously, the 20-odd cavalrymen charged toward Iron Cloak Li, but they weren't the ones to make the first move. Boom! With a flash of light, the stellar energy Iron Cloak descended from the sky and enveloped one of the Tang dynasty cavalrymen. Ka-cha-cha! A series of jarring sounds echoed, and blood spurted out from beneath the iron cloak. At the same time, the Tang dynasty cavalryman was reduced to a pile of mangled flesh. All of you, all of you, all of you, all of you, die! A savage gleam flashed across Iron Cloak Li's eyes as he waved his right hand to summon back his stellar energy iron cloak. Then, his figure flashed as he charged toward the crowd. Boom! More than 10 halos of thorns shot forth from all directions, clashing with one another, and clashing with the 5 black halos around Iron Cloak Li's body. The halos of different attributes twisted violently in the air like giant gears, clashing, clashing, and pulling against one another. The sound of metal clanking echoed endlessly. The white shockwaves from the collision of stellar energy surged several dozen zhang into the sky, raising sand and dust that filled the air. But the side with more halos wasn't a match for the 5 black halos at all. But without their steeds, these cavalrymen could only be considered foot soldiers. They were far from being able to bring out the fearsome might of their steeds. Single character consecutive slash. Just as everyone's true martial halo was being suppressed by Iron Cloak Li, Wang Chong suddenly shot forth like a cannonball from the ground, appearing right above Iron Cloak Li's head in the blink of an eye. Even though Wang Chong's cultivation realm was beneath that of the others, his strength, movement technique, agility, and speed were far above that of the others. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Iron Cloak Li narrowed his eyes, and a hint of nervousness surfaced in his eyes. While Wang Chong's strength wasn't worth a mention, the sword in his hand was the greatest threat to his Iron Cloak technique. Come! Iron Cloak Li's figure blurred, as he abruptly leaped into the air. Gathering stellar energy in his right fist, he sent a powerful punch toward Wang Chong. Chapter 357. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's punch landed on thin air. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's punch landed, but it struck nothing but air. The Wang Chong in midair dissipated into an afterimage, and the real Wang Chong appeared behind Iron Cloak Li. Even Iron Cloak Li was fooled by the phantom steps created by the single consecutive slash. Iron Cloak Li's face tensed up, and the black stellar energy iron cloak he was wearing swiftly morphed, forming layers upon layers of iron cloak. Clang! To think that Wang Chong's sure kill attack would be blocked. Harumphing coldly, Iron Cloak Li sent a punch behind him. Lad, you're thinking too simply. Do you think that my iron cloak technique can only allow me to take a beating? Even if you have such a powerful weapon, you won't be able to break my iron cloak technique. Is that so? Give it a try then. A young bone-chilling voice sounded by Iron Cloak Li's ear. This was the first time Wang Chong had responded to Iron Cloak Li. Everyone work together with me. Attack. At the same time, Wang Chong also executed his strongest attack. 8 steps of the furious flood dragon. The roars of innumerable dragons echoed in the air, and the silhouettes of flood dragons appeared in everyone's ears. At the same time, the sound of metal clanging echoed in the air, and the halos of true martial realm surged toward Iron Cloak Li from all directions. At this moment, a sliver of danger finally surfaced in Iron Cloak Li's eyes. His iron cloak technique was extremely flexible, and he was able to strengthen the defense of a certain part of his body through overlapping one another. As such, he was able to block even Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword. But at the same time, when the defense of a troop was strengthened, the defense of the other parts of the troop would be weakened. If he were to deal with Wang Chong alone, he would still be able to deal with him. But if he were to face the other Tang Dynasty cavalrymen, his stellar energy iron cloak technique would be severely lacking. Nay! All of a sudden, the neighing of a horse sounded from outside. Leader, let me help you. Before his voice faded away, a muscular man with bare arms and strong muscles leaped into the air, leaping over. At this moment Chang Dao, one of Iron Cloak Li's subordinates, finally arrived. Leader, let me help you. Leader, let me help you. Brothers, kill these soldiers and avenge our fallen brothers. That a series of neighing sounds could be heard as one highwayman after another was slaughtered. Charging through the outer perimeters, the highwaymen charged in with killing intent. Ha ha ha. Good. Just in time. Hearing the voice, Iron Cloak Li's spirit was invigorated. Wang Chong's Wuxia steel sword had forced him into a corner, and he had no choice but to seek help from others. The appearance of the horse gang was just in time. Brat, let's see how long you can last. Just accept your fate obediently. A powerful burst of stellar energy burst forth from Iron Cloak Li's body, and he actually managed to withstand Wang Chong's 8 steps of the furious flood dragon. Nay! The neighing of the highwaymen grew louder and louder, and the faces of the cavalrymen warped in horror. Wang Chong and Bai Siling's faces paled, and their hearts sank to the bottom of an abyss. Even if they had the Wuxia steel sword, it was already too late. Their final chance had failed as well. What awaited them now was the order to wipe them out. Everyone listen up. Ignore everything else, and focus on attacking Iron Cloak Li. Even if we die, we must drag him down with us. A resolute gleam flashed across Wang Chong's eyes as his resounding voice echoed in everyone's ears. Right after those words were spoken, Wang Chong executed the single-character consecutive slash once more, and with a flicker he charged toward Iron Cloak Li. Brat, no matter what happens to the others, I will kill you today. Iron Cloak Lee flew into a rage. Wang Chong was already on the brink of death. And yet, the other party was still thinking of dragging him down with him. This infuriated Iron Cloak Lee to the point where he felt like his lungs were about to explode. It was this brat's fault that so many of them were killed by the 40 cavalrymen. Iron Cloak Lee could ignore the others, but Iron Cloak Lee was determined to kill this brat. I would like to see how an ant who hasn't even reached true martial realm, like you, will be able to kill me. Iron Cloak Lee's eyes were brimming with killing intent. His body swayed, and like a hawk he soared into the sky. Wang! There was a flash of light, and a black silhouette flew out from his body to envelop Wang Chong. Stellar Energy Iron Cloak. At the very last moment, Iron Cloak Lee finally brought out his strongest Stellar Energy Iron Cloak. He wanted to shroud Wang Chong in his Stellar Energy Iron Cloak, just like the other cavalrymen, crushing the latter's bones and turning him into a bloody mess. Only then would he be able to vent the hatred in his heart, and the rage he felt from losing so many of his elite subordinates. He wouldn't let anyone else do the dirty work of this brat. He would kill him personally. Wang. Movement in the air wasn't as convenient as on the ground, and without the help of the white hoof shadow, Wang Chong wasn't going to be as lucky as before. Wang. With a flash of light, the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak fell from the sky and enveloped both Wang Chong and his sword. Even if Wang Chong's sword could pierce through the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak, there was no doubt that he would die this time. With the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak restraining Wang Chong, it was also restraining his sword. This time, nothing could threaten him. Xiling, now is the time. Strike! Just as Iron Cloak Lee was about to crush Wang Chong into a ball of flesh, Wang Chong's shrill voice suddenly sounded from beneath the Stellar Energy Iron Cloak. What is that? Iron Cloak Lee's heart jolted in alarm. No matter how slow he was, he could tell that something was amiss. For a young soldier to be ordered to do something even though he was on the verge of death, it couldn't be anything good. He couldn't help but feel as if he had been schemed against. Hiss! Before he could figure out what was wrong, he suddenly heard a bellow by his ear, accompanied by the shrill whistle of a sharp object piercing through the air. Iron Cloak Lee felt as if the voice was right beside his ear. Had it been any other time, Iron Cloak Lee would have been able to dodge it easily, but in order to deal with Wang Chong, his body was in the air, and his movements weren't as convenient as before. Hung Long. In that instant, Iron Cloak Lee only had the time to gather all of his stellar energy and send out a palm strike before a sword pierced through his neck. Iron Cloak Lee's powerful stellar energy was actually unable to stop it in the slightest. That sword. Looking at the familiar tip of the sword protruding from his neck, a gleam of understanding flashed across Iron Cloak Lee's eyes, after which his vision turned dark and he lost consciousness. Leader! A shrill cry echoed in the air. To the highwaymen who had rushed over ferociously, what they saw was a sight that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. A young white-clothed girl became one with her sword in the void and pierced through the leader's neck with her sword. Just when everyone was at their happiest, most excited, and most in the upper hand, their leader was stabbed to death. In that instant, everyone felt their limbs turning cold, and their hearts plummeted to the depths of the abyss. Assassinated! Assassinated! To think that he would be assassinated. At this moment, time seemed to have come to a standstill. Even the neighing of the war horses had been suppressed. To the highwaymen who were galloping over from afar, there was no doubt in their minds. They could see everything clearly. At the very last moment of victory, the young soldier had suddenly used himself as bait to steal the stellar energy iron cloak from their leader. At the same time, the divine weapon he was carrying had slipped away from the stellar energy iron cloak, drawing an arc in the air before falling into the hands of the young white-robed lady. The latter had relied on that divine weapon to become one with the sword and pierce through the leader's neck, ending the entire battle and changing the outcome of the battle. Just like that, a sure-win battle had been reversed. So, with Iron Cloak Lee's death, the stellar energy iron cloak dissipated, and Wang Chong immediately fell from it. Pung! Pung! Pressing his palm against the ground, Wang Chong leaped forward and sliced off Iron Cloak Lee's head with a single slash. Iron Cloak Lee is dead. Anyone who dares to go against the army will only be courting death. Even if he escapes to the western regions, he'll still be doomed. Holding the sword in his right hand and grabbing Iron Cloak Li's head with his left, Wang Chong stared at the highwaymen with a cold gaze reminiscent of a deity, instilling fear in them. Hu Lang was dead, more than 80 of their brothers were dead, and more than 100 of their elite bandits were dead as well. Now, even their invincible leader had fallen under the schemes of this young man. At this very moment, even someone as ferocious as Chang Dao couldn't help but shudder in fear at the sight of that young man. No one knew what the young man was up to, and no one knew what tricks he had up his sleeves. The 40 Tang dynasty cavalrymen had killed their leader, and more than 200 of their brothers. How many of the remaining 20-odd men should they kill? At this moment, even the most ferocious of bandits couldn't help but feel fearful. The morale of the army had completely crumbled. When their leader was around, they still had a reason to fight for him. But now that reason no longer existed. Even if they managed to kill these soldiers by a fluke, it would be meaningless. Not only would they not gain anything from this, they might even lose their lives. What are you waiting for? Scram! Raising his head, Wang Chong stepped forward and bellowed. In an instant, the bandits seemed to have awoken from a dream. Hung Long Long, as though they had received a huge fright, the bandits of the various strongholds scattered in all directions. Following that, a large group of highwaymen also scattered in all directions, devoid of fighting spirit. In just an instant, the 80 highwaymen and bandits had been completely wiped out. Lord, we've won! A surviving Tang dynasty cavalryman walked over and exhaled deeply. We've won, but we haven't won yet. Let's go, we still have one last thing to do. Shaking his head, Wang Chong raised his head and gazed at a corner in the distance. The battle cries were getting louder and louder. Chapter 358. On the slope around the corner, the battle was extremely intense. Like a tsunami, the bandits surged toward Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others. Bad news. Lord Military Advisor, bad news. All of a sudden, smoke and dust billowed from behind the corner. A bandit rode over on a horse and stumbled his way to Zhou side. Lord Military Advisor, bad news. The chief is. The highwayman kneeling on the ground stuttered in fear. He pointed a finger outside, but he was unable to finish his words clearly. Pa! In midair, a palm suddenly stretched out and slapped the highwayman's face. Bastard, speak clearly. What happened to the chief? Zhou roared furiously. That bastard kept saying that the chief was in trouble, but he was unable to explain what was going on. This was truly infuriating. Lord Military Advisor, bad news. The chief has been killed. The highwayman kneeling on the ground was stunned for a moment. This time, he was more articulate, and he managed to finish his words in a single breath. Hung Long. It was like a stone that gave rise to 1,000 ripples. An ordinary sentence from this bandit was like a heavy bomb that gave rise to a tempestuous storm in everyone's hearts. Within a radius of several dozen zhang, everyone who heard those words fell silent. Even the battle cries from afar had died down significantly. Looking at the highwayman on the ground, everyone was dumbfounded. Bastard! What nonsense are you spouting? Zhou face warped in shock and rage. Looking at the highwayman who had reported the news, he raised his leg and kicked him to the ground. The chief possesses unparalleled strength, and he has the protection of the metal cloak. How could he possibly die? If you continue to mislead the military advisor with your lies, I'll make an example out of you. As Zhou spoke, he unsheathed his saber and aimed it at the bandit. The chief couldn't possibly die. There was no way he could possibly die, given his superior martial arts. And he had brought so many elite subordinates with him. How could he possibly be unable to defeat a brat and a bunch of bandits? He would never believe such ridiculous news. However, the uneasiness in his heart increased rapidly. No matter what the truth was, there was one thing Zhou was sure of. Something must have happened on the leader's side. However, even if Zhou was beaten to death, he could never imagine what had happened over there in such a short period of time. And what would happen next? Where's the jackal? Where was the long saber? Where was the fire ape? Are these bastards all dead? Why the fuck haven't they come back yet? Zhou, look at this. What's this? Just as Zhou was frightened and uneasy, a thunderous roar suddenly rang out. Amidst the rumbling sound, a black object was suddenly thrown over from the corner of the official road. That thing rolled a few times in the air, before accurately stabbing into a sharp branch on the slope to the left of the official road. As the mountain wind blew, the outer layer of cloth suddenly fell apart, revealing a hideous human head with disheveled hair. Hua! Seeing the human head on the tree, the hundreds of bandits and highwaymen in the area seemed to have received a huge fright, and a deafening cry echoed in the air. Many people were so frightened that they fell down the hillside. Chief, seeing that head, Zhou's eyes were bloodshot, and his eyes were bloodshot. That human head was none other than the head of the Iron Cloak highwayman, Iron Cloak Li. His eyes were wide open in fury, as if he didn't believe that he would die even at the very last moment. Zhou couldn't believe that the person who had the protection of the Iron Cloak Li and a dozen true martial realm experts would die just like that. In that instant, Zhou felt as if he had been struck by lightning, and the world around him seemed to have collapsed. Everyone listen up. That isn't the chief, it's just a fake head. Everyone listen up. Attack the soldiers on the slope with all your might, and kill them as a blood sacrifice. If anyone dares to hold back, I'll kill him as a sacrifice. Zhou's face darkened, and he suddenly bellowed viciously. Raising a finger, he pointed at the soldiers on the slope. Zhou, that's not up to you. A voice echoed in Zhang Xian's ears. Hong Wang, a group of Great Tang cavalrymen, suddenly charged into the midst of the bandits and highwaymen, in an arrow formation at the speed of lightning. Boom! In an instant, the crowd fell into chaos. After all of the top-notch highwaymen and bandits had been taken away, the remaining bandits and highwaymen had yet to reach true martial realm. After witnessing the might of the charge of Wang Chong and the Tang dynasty cavalrymen, there were still some who weren't fearful. This was especially so when the severed head of Iron Cloak Li was still hanging from the tree. Get out of the way. Be careful. They're here again. They really killed our chief. We need to leave. The crowd was in a state of panic. Some of them even tried to flee in panic, creating a chaotic scene. Bastard! Who dares to run? Stop right there. Zhou flew into a rage. He whipped out his saber and prepared to deal with the highwayman. But before he could make a move, a bone-chilling voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Single character consecutive slash. Wang Chong slapped the back of his steed, and his figure shot into the sky like a cannonball. After a few somersaults in the air, he pierced through the air with his sword and pierced through Zhou's neck. Wang Chong had long realized that Zhou was just a simple strategist, and his cultivation in martial arts wasn't too high. So fast. All Zhou saw was a flash of sword light, before he was pierced through by Wang Chong. At the very last moment before he was pierced, Zhou saw an incomparably sharp sword with innumerable saw-teeth on its edge. It was a 3-chi-long sword with intricate demonic patterns on its surface. Wuxia steel sword. In that instant, Zhou recognized the inconceivably sharp sword in Wang Chong's hand. Unlike Iron Cloak Li, Zhou knew what the sword looked like. In the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. Suddenly, Zhou understood what had happened. To think that. As the final thought flashed across his mind, Zhou's vision turned dark, and he lost consciousness. Zhou is here. If you dare to resist, you'll be executed along with this wretch. With a single slash, Wang Chong severed Zhou's head before standing on top of the boulder and raising it high up. Hong Long, Iron Cloak Li was dead. Zhou was dead. With the death of their two leaders, the bandits were like dragons without a leader, causing all the bandits to instantly lose their will to fight and flee for their lives with a bang. Brothers, the time for vengeance has come. On the slope, the surviving soldiers rejoiced. The two groups of cavalrymen quickly gathered together and chased after the fleeing highwaymen and bandits. The several hundred bandits and highwaymen were forced to flee even faster under the pursuit of the dozens of cavalrymen and highwaymen. In just a short period of time, dozens of bandits and highwaymen were slain, lying in a pool of their own blood. Seeing how the surrounding bandits and highwaymen were being routed, Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief. With so many bandits and highwaymen here, it would be hard to say who would emerge victorious if they were to clash head-on. Wang Chong had made a risky move, but it was fortunate that his decapitation operation was effective. The morale of the bandits and highwaymen had already fallen into disarray, and they were already on the verge of collapse. The art of war says that attacking the heart is better than attacking the city. It seems like that's the case. Standing on top of the boulder, Wang Chong looked at the bandits and highwaymen who were being chased around him and sighed. It was just a bunch of bandits and highwaymen. In Wang Chong's life, he had faced many more formidable opponents. But without a doubt, this was the closest Wang Chong had come to death ever since his reincarnation. Bandits and highwaymen were insignificant, but when there were too many of them, they could still be fatal. To Wang Chong, this experience had left a deep impression on him. Di-da-da. Just as he was deep in thought, the hurried galloping of a horse sounded. Raising his head, Wang Chong saw a figure riding a warhorse toward Wang Chong. "Lord, it's great to be able to see you all. We nearly thought that we were going to die." Lieutenant Zhang San dismounted from his horse and leaped onto the boulder that Wang Chong was standing on. His eyes were brimming with joy and excitement, but even more than that, respect. This time, their lives were saved by Wang Chong. If not for Wang Chong and the others, they would have died a long time ago. More importantly, as a soldier, Zhang San saw a kind of outstanding, extraordinary, and at the same time different commanding talent in this young man. It could even be said to be an art. Although the youth in front of him didn't have any official position, and his face was slightly immature, Zhang San believed that this person's future achievements would be extremely shocking. This was what Zhang San respected as a soldier. "Lieutenant Zhang San is being too polite. We serve the royal court as one. If we were in your shoes, I believe that you would have done the same." Wang Chong replied calmly. Zhang San was taken aback, and for once he fell silent. Glancing at Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, who were still venting their anger on the battlefield, a bitter smile crept onto Zhang San's lips. If the ones who were caught in the encirclement were this lord and Bai Siling, he wouldn't be able to guarantee their safety. Wang Chong knew what Zhang San was thinking, but he simply chuckled lightly and ignored him. This wasn't a matter of whether he could save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu or not. After all, Su Gan and Huang Yongtu weren't the ones with the most manpower on the slope. If several hundred bandits and highwaymen were to suddenly go back on their word and launch a counterattack, they would be in deep trouble. Thus, even after the bandits had dispersed, the imperial army didn't stop pursuing them. Roughly an incense's time later, the scattered bandits fled into the depths of the mountain, and only then did the battle come to an end. All of the surviving cavalrymen of the Tang dynasty began to gather around the boulder where Wang Chong was. In this operation, the 80 veterans had been reduced to 40 or so. This was a significant loss, and nearly half of them had died in the hands of Iron Cloak Li. Even though Iron Cloak Li had managed to kill more than 300 highwaymen and highwaymen, including 80 true martial realm highwaymen, along with 80 highwaymen and highwaymen, Wang Chong still couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret. These precious cavalrymen should have died in the service of the empire on the battlefield, not in the hands of these highwaymen. But this was the reality. Even soldiers of the royal court would have to pay with their lives if they were to encounter a truly formidable martial artist. Chapter 359. Gallop. Just as Wang Chong was deep in thought, the sound of galloping suddenly vanished. Not only so, Wang Chong couldn't hear the slightest sound. It was as if the entire world had fallen silent. Surprised, Wang Chong raised his head, only to realize that all of the cavalrymen had gathered before him. At the very front of the cavalrymen were Su Gan, Huang Yongtu and Bai Siling. Everyone's gazes were on him. The atmosphere had suddenly turned a little bizarre. "What's wrong?" Wang Chong was taken aback. "Who in the world are you?" Su Gan asked. His expression was grim, as if he was looking at some kind of mysterious creature. "The battle has already come to an end. Are you still not going to tell us?" Huang Yongtu asked solemnly from the back of his steed. "Don't you all know who I am? Do you want me to be someone else?" Wang Chong chuckled. You know that's not what we mean. Su Gan shook his head and replied seriously. Xiling, what about you? It's one thing for them. But are you going to be the same as them? Wang Chong stared at Bai Xiling, who was seated beside Su Gan, Huang Yongtu and Su Gan. Of course, Bai Xiling rolled her eyes in exasperation. I am the one who wants to know the most, all right? It's one thing for the two of them. But I have been fighting alongside you for so long, braving through life and death. And yet, you dare to hide the truth from me? If not for the fact that I can't bring myself to lay my hands on you, I would have long lifted you up and spanked your bottom. Bai Xiling gritted her teeth furiously. That darned brat had been wary of her all along the way. Even when he went up the mountain with her to deal with the bandits, he didn't do much at all. She wasn't a fool, so how could she not have sensed it? If not for the Iron Cloak highwayman forcing him to use his ability, she would have been dead by now. Bai Xiling didn't even know that he was so good at commanding the cavalry. Just thinking about it makes me angry. Thus this time, she stood by Su Gan and Huang Yongtu's side without any hesitation. This is blatant betrayal, Wang Chong said. Tisk, Bai Xiling turned her head away. If I'm not mistaken, the sword in your hand should be a Wuxia steel sword. At this moment Su Gan suddenly spoke up. Glancing at the sword in Wang Chong's hand, he said, this kind of saber and sword has already been copied down to 70 to 80,000 taels of gold each. And there are even over 100,000 taels of gold each. Moreover, there is no market for them. You can't possibly say that this is something that ordinary people can afford, right? As a scion of a prestigious clan, if Su Gan didn't even know of the famous Wuxia steel sword in the capital, he would really be blind. No matter how slow Su Gan was, he knew that Bai Xiling was right. He and Huang Yongtu had misjudged the other party. Even he couldn't afford such an expensive weapon, needless to say others. But Wang Chong simply smiled, not answering the question. Lieutenant Zhang, is that what you think as well? Wang Chong turned to the silent Lieutenant Zhang Lin and asked. He, it would be my honor to know your identity. As Zhang San spoke, he gave a slight military salute, his expression extremely respectful. If not for Wang Chong, he Su Gan and Huang Yongtu would have been wiped out by now. Thus, just like Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, Zhang Lin yearned to know Wang Chong's identity. Lieutenant Zhang, you too. Sigh, I really don't know what to do with you. Wang Chong rubbed his forehead with a pained look on his face. Putting aside the others, even Lieutenant Zhang was on their side as well. It seemed like they were working together to force Wang Chong to abdicate. From the looks of it, if he didn't give them an explanation today, they wouldn't let this matter rest. However, after all the trials and tribulations they had gone through, it wouldn't be right for him to keep his identity a secret. All right, since you want to know so badly, I'll fulfill your wish. Wang Chong chuckled without hiding anything. Raising his robe, Wang Chong silently took out a dazzling golden token from the pouch at his waist and held it in his right hand. Boom! Seeing the token in Wang Chong's hand, everyone's eyes widened in shock. Blazing Cloud, that's the token of the Wang clan. You are an offspring of the Wang clan. In that instant Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Zhang Lin, and even Bai Xiling were shocked. All along, they had thought that Wang Chong was just an ordinary commoner. Yet, not only was Wang Chong's background not inferior to theirs, it was even more illustrious than theirs. Even the Su clan and Huang Yong clan couldn't compare to a clan of generals and ministers like the Wang clan. Bai Xiling had a rough idea of the background of the Wang clan, but even Bai Xiling didn't expect Wang Chong's background to be so illustrious. The Bai clan was definitely one of the top clans in the capital, even more so than the Su clan and Huang clan. However, even the Bai family paled in comparison to the Wang family in the capital. She didn't expect Wang Chong's background to be so illustrious. What is your relationship with Duke Jiao? Huang Yongtu asked seriously. You have really defeated me. The Wang clan was founded by the Duke Jiao you speak of, and I am an offspring of the Wang clan. What do you think our relationship is? Wang Chong rubbed his forehead. Huang Yongtu replied awkwardly. The Wang clan only has 3 offspring. The eldest son, Wang Fu, is currently serving in the military, and the second son, Wang Bei, is much younger than you. If I'm not mistaken, You should be the third son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong, right? Su Gan suddenly asked. Yes, Wang Chong admitted readily. Su Gan was much smarter than he had thought, guessing his identity in an instant. Hearing Wang Chong admit to it personally, a complicated look flashed across Su Gan's eyes. In the Tang dynasty, the person who had been in the limelight recently was none other than the third son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong. The conflict with the Yao clan, the regional commander's incident, the Gogrian assassins. Even the most beloved daughter of the Holy Emperor, consort Tai Zhen, had a direct or indirect relationship with Wang Chong. Thus, despite his young age, the deeds that Wang Chong had accomplished had left even Su Gan in awe. Even after traveling together for so many days, Su Gan had never imagined that the young man whom he had found in Mysore was actually the most famous person in the capital, Wang Chong. If he had known that it was Wang Chong, there was no way Su Gan would have treated him with such an attitude. He couldn't wait to befriend him. There was no one whom he couldn't befriend. I can't take it anymore. Just as Wang Chong was feeling pleased with himself, a furious voice suddenly sounded from the side. Looking at Wang Chong standing on the boulder, Bai Siling was on the verge of going berserk. Brat, how dare you fool me like that? I'll kill you. Bai Siling raised the Baihong sword in her hand and leaped from the back of her steed. Without a word, she charged straight for Wang Chong. Putting aside Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, even Wang Chong was taken aback. Bai Siling, what are you doing? Wang Chong executed the phantom movement art, and 3 silhouettes appeared in the blink of an eye as he dashed toward the bottom of the boulder. Boom! Sparks flew from the boulder, and shattered rocks flew in all directions. The spot where Wang Chong was standing a moment ago had a chi-deep gash left behind by Bai Siling. The boulder shattered, and dust rose several zhang into the air. Cold sweat trickled down Wang Chong's back. That violent lady really dared to do it. Brat, don't go. Let me slash you 3 times first. Of course I'll go. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, flew around the forest on the hillside. This comical sight left the crowd bursting into laughter, and the sorrowful atmosphere of losing many men in the battle lessened significantly. In the end, Bai Siling only gave up when she ran out of strength. After all, Iron Cloak Li's 2 palm strikes weren't easy to deal with. If not for her superior cultivation and powerful stellar energy, she would have been killed by Iron Cloak Li by now. I'll settle the score with you once I recover. Bai Siling sat on the boulder and pointed a finger at Wang Chong as she panted heavily. You're welcome anytime. Wang Chong chuckled. Even though they had been chased all over the mountain by Bai Siling, after revealing their identities, the group seemed to have gotten much closer. What should we do next? What should we do with the corpses of the soldiers? We can't possibly just leave them exposed there, right? After everyone had calmed down, Su Gan suddenly asked, Let's bury them together. I wish to give them a proper burial. At the very least, their corpses won't be left in the wilderness. It was Bai Siling, who was resting on the boulder, who said those words with a hint of sorrow in her eyes. After all, they were comrades who had fought side by side with her. It was hard for her to bear the loss of so many of them. There's no need for that. Wang Chong shook his head dispiritedly. Let them be. Inform the Bureau of Military Personnel of this matter, and they'll send people over to collect the corpses as soon as possible. The families of the soldiers who died in battle will be compensated, and their children will be given preferential treatment. The Bureau of Military Personnel will also record their names down, and they will be treated as soldiers who have died on the battlefield. This is the best ending for a soldier. Zhang Lin looked at Wang Chong's back with a hint of astonishment in his eyes. But thinking about Wang Chong's background, it made sense. Wang Gongzi is right. This is the way our brothers want to die, an honorable death. Zhang Lin nodded. In this world, there were some who could live to the end of their lives, but there were others who could only die on the battlefield. If there were people who could enjoy peace, there would be people who would silently protect them. From the moment they stepped onto the battlefield, they were already prepared to die. But I don't think the Bureau of Military Personnel will agree to it. After all, Su Gan said hesitantly. Even though Su Gan didn't finish his words, Wang Chong already understood what he was trying to say. Don't worry. They will agree to it. I will make them agree to it. Chapter 360. These people had returned from hundreds of battles on the battlefield and had made great contributions to the empire. Although this was not the battlefield, for a warrior, what they wanted was not the compensation from the Ministry of War, but an honorable and dignified death. There was no way Wang Chong could refuse such a lowly request. Even if the Ministry of War did not agree, he would think of a way to get the King of Song and Big Uncle to agree. The current him indeed had the ability to do so. Boom! Suddenly, a trembling sound reached his ears. Wang Chong opened his eyes and saw that all the surviving cavalrymen had suddenly dismounted from their horses. Each of them placed their left hands on their chests and knelt on the ground with their right knees. They were kneeling respectfully on the ground, their expressions filled with gratitude. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Loud voices reverberated in the air. Wang Chong looked at this scene and was stunned for a moment. He smiled, and then a hint of bitterness appeared at the corner of his mouth. Other than Bai Siling behind him, no one else saw it. Only warriors could understand warriors. Although Wang Chong was not a warrior, he was the leader of the warriors. Wang Chong knew what they were thanking him for. They were not thanking him for himself, but for their comrades who had died in battle. In an instant, it was as if time had passed. Wang Chong felt as if he had returned to his previous life. Wang Chong thought of his former subordinates. On the Divine Continent, they had once accompanied him, fought shoulder to shoulder with him without a care for their own safety, and in the end, disappeared like moths to a flame. In that instant, Wang Chong felt an incomparable bitterness in his heart. A light breeze blew, ruffling the hair on Wang Chong's temples. Wang Chong did not know that at that moment, he had given Bai Siling a shock that she had never experienced in her previous life. Bai Siling did not know what kind of experience a person had to go through to reveal such a bitter expression. That wasn't something a 15 or 16-year-old young man, who didn't have to worry about worldly affairs, should have. Sitting on the boulder, Bai Siling stared blankly at the side of Wang Chong's face. At that moment, Bai Siling felt lost. She had already figured out the identity of this young man, but Bai Siling realized that she had only discovered more mysteries. There seemed to be a thick layer of mystery surrounding this young man. He had never told anyone, nor did he want to tell anyone. Apart from himself, there seemed to be no one else who knew. Who are you? Bai Siling lowered her head and buried it between her knees. At that moment, she realized that her hair and heart were in a mess. After resting up, Wang Chong and the others headed straight for the old nest of the Iron Cloak Highwayman. Iron Cloak Li was dead, and advisor Zhouan had been killed as well. The Iron Cloak Highwayman, who had once ruled over the region, had vanished along with him. However, there was one more important matter that they hadn't done yet, and that was to collect the spoils of war. A bandit of Iron Cloak Li's caliber had plundered from Longxi to the capital for many years, and the wealth he had accumulated was unimaginable. On top of that, the bandits and highwaymen who had submitted to him would often contribute a portion of their wealth to show their sincerity. Over the years, the sincerity of the Iron Cloak Highwayman was truly astounding. Even though Wang Chong was a man who had seen much of the world, he didn't think that it would be a waste for him to turn down such wealth. Wang Chong, do you think that the scattered highwaymen will return to plunder after Iron Cloak Li's death? Bai Siling caught up to Wang Chong and asked. I don't know. However, I can't rule out that possibility. Wang Chong said. Ah, doesn't that mean that we have made a wasted trip? Bai Siling said with a frown. Haha, it's not that simple. It's impossible for Iron Cloak Li to leave his nest unguarded. Even though we have killed Iron Cloak Li, do you think that those who are guarding the nest will believe us so easily? Besides, do you think that the wealth of your Bai clan will be placed in the open, so that anyone can take it away as they please? Are you asking for a beating? Can't you speak properly? Bai Siling rolled her eyes in annoyance. Just a few words from this brat was enough to make one want to pummel him. Haha, if you don't want to say it, then don't say it. The treasury of a bandit like Iron Cloak Li isn't that easy to breach. It'll save us a lot of effort if those people go in our stead, Wang Chong said nonchalantly. Bai Xiling stared at Wang Chong, as if she was looking at a monster. Only now did she understand why Wang Chong wasn't anxious at all. It turned out that he was intending to make use of the scattered highwaymen to work for him. You really are a monster. Anyone who goes against you will surely fall for your schemes. I really don't understand. You are only in your teens, and you should have never left the capital before. How in the world do you know so much? In fact, I'm glad that I didn't go with Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, or else I would have been done in by you as well, Bai Xiling said. Those words fell into the ears of Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, and both of them looked at each other in embarrassment. Bai Xiling sure knew how to rub it in. But then again, it was no wonder why the other party would say that. Hee Xiling, don't worry. How can I bear to part with a beauty like you? Wang Chong chuckled. The words beauty from Wang Chong made Bai Xiling blush in embarrassment. Hearing Wang Chong call her a great beauty, Bai Xiling's face reddened in embarrassment, and she cursed at Wang Chong. Brat, you even dare to tease me. Are you itching for a beating? No. Wang Chong squeezed the horse's belly, and Neigh, the white-hoofed shadow, let out a long neigh and rushed forward with Wang Chong in tow. Wang Chong was growing more and more fond of this divine chariot that had been gifted to him by the King of Song. In the battle with Iron Cloak Li, most of the steeds used to obstruct the bandits were killed. Only the white-hoofed shadow dashed left and right, sensing the danger ahead of time. Using the horses as cover, he found a gap and successfully escaped. This was the second time the white-hoofed shadow had managed to escape from danger, including the Gogurian's assault on the Kunwa training camp. When he was surrounded and faced with danger, the white-hoofed shadow did not need to worry about him at all. This made Wang Chong even more hopeful. Galloping non-stop, Wang Chong and the others finally arrived at the base of the Iron Cloak Highwayman before nightfall. This was a hill that wasn't too high. It was barren, and there wasn't a single tree on it. However, there were fences, sentry towers, and barracks. By the time Wang Chong and the others arrived, the barracks was already in a state of chaos, and shouts of battle could be heard. Bandits and highwaymen were slaughtering one another, and loud explosions could be heard from the underground. Looks like we came at the right time. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong's eyes lit up, and he took the lead to charge forward. Boom! One with the Wuxia steel sword. Zhang Xian executed the single consecutive slash, and the Wuxia steel sword pierced through the stellar energy of one of the highwaymen and into his heart. The highwayman's body trembled violently, and deep fear could still be seen in his eyes. Then, he fell from the back of his steed and fell to the ground motionless. Kill! Behind them, Su Gan and Huang Yongtu were alerted by Wang Chong's warning. If the treasures had already been taken, there wouldn't be any battle here. Since there were bandits and highwaymen fighting here, it meant that the treasures of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen hadn't been taken away yet. Kill! More than 30 Tang Dynasty cavalrymen, along with Zhang Lin, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Bai Xiling, and the others, a total of 40 or so cavalrymen, charged toward the Iron Cloak Highwaymen's barracks. Bad news, the soldiers are here. Those who recognized Wang Chong and the others were already scared out of their wits. Forgetting about the treasures, they immediately fled for their lives. The highwaymen on the hills were fleeing for their lives, wishing that they could grow an extra pair of legs so that they could get as far away from these killing gods as possible. Even the 500 to 600 men, led by their former leader, were defeated by them. How could this small number of people on the hill be enough for them to kill? The highwaymen on the hill swiftly scattered, leaving behind those who didn't participate in the battle, those who didn't recognize Wang Chong and the others, and those who didn't know who they were swiftly slaughtered as if they were vegetables being chopped up. After clearing up the bandits on the hill, Zhang Xian and the others walked down the passageway. A massive metal gate had collapsed, and a group of highwaymen and bandits were currently plundering the treasures within. Upon seeing Wang Chong and the others, the group was stunned. Clearly, they didn't expect the soldiers to appear here. This time, without even needing Wang Chong's orders, the group charged forward and swiftly wiped out the bandits and highwaymen. Wang Chong and the others had arrived at the perfect moment. The bandits and highwaymen had just knocked down the metal gate, and not a single one of them had managed to escape. What a huge metal gate! It must weigh at least 7,000 to 8,000 jin. Wang Chong exclaimed in awe as he examined the collapsed metal gate. That was because Wang Chong realized that the metal gate was actually forged using deep-sea Xian metal, and it was an extremely valuable material of the highest quality. It was a top-notch material that could be used to forge top-notch armor. In the army, only the most elite soldiers were qualified to be equipped with it. Based on the standard of heavy infantry in the army, a set of Xian metal heavy armor weighed around 100 jin, and there were 70 to 80 sets of Xian metal heavy armor here. It might not sound like a lot, but one must know that this kind of heavy infantry was equipped to the teeth. This was a heavily armored elite force that was used to assault enemy master archers. Even the most formidable master archer wouldn't be able to pierce through deep-sea Xian metal with a single arrow. In the army, this kind of material was invaluable. Even in the Great Tang army, there weren't many infantrymen equipped with such heavy armor. The entire army of the Tang dynasty, including the regular army, the reserve army, and the imperial army, only numbered around 7,000 to 8,000. In an army of 10,000, there wouldn't be more than 500 to 600 infantrymen equipped with such heavy armor that could counter master archers. The value of such heavy armor was unimaginable. Deep-sea Xian metal is priceless, and a set of top-notch deep-sea Xian metal heavy armor can fetch up to 70,000 to 80,000 gold taels per set. If we can forge 70 to 80 sets here, wouldn't that be equivalent to 4 to 5 million gold taels? Wang Chong stroked his chin in excitement. Of course, it was impossible for pure deep-sea Xian metal to be so expensive. Furthermore, they still had to be processed and inscribed with formations. However, this was what Wang Chong didn't lack. Chapter 361. Given the wealth of the Tang dynasty, how could it not be able to build a heavy infantry formation of several tens of thousands? But sometimes it wasn't just a problem of money. Take Wuxia steel for example. While Wang Chong would love to buy a few million jun of it, the problem was that one had to have a huge stockpile and a high production rate. This was how scarce resources were. Even if one had the money, it was impossible to buy them. Iron cloak sure is a reckless waste of resources. Without a doubt, Wang Chong knew that Iron Cloak must have plundered the high-tier deep-sea Xian metal from the western regions and Abbasid Caliphate merchants on the Silk Road. Even the Tang dynasty didn't have enough high-tier deep-sea Xian metal for themselves. And yet, these western regions and Abbasid Caliphate merchants were able to buy it and smuggle it back to their own countries. From this, it could be seen how brazen the trade on the Silk Road was. As long as there was sufficient profit, there was nothing that couldn't be traded. It was no wonder Elder Zhao and Elder Yi raised this issue during grandfather's birthday banquet. But upon seeing this metal gate, Wang Chong realized that Elder Zhao and Elder Yi had underestimated this problem. The problem of smuggling on the Silk Road was far more serious than they had thought. When I return, I should get the Zhang clan to send some men to move this gate back and have them forge it into heavy armor. I believe that they should be interested in this matter. Also, I should inform Big Uncle and the King of Song to investigate this matter. Wang Chong thought. After seeing this metal gate, Wang Chong's interest in anything else disappeared. With this metal gate, Wang Chong's trip wouldn't have been in vain. But at this moment, no one was aware of Wang Chong's thoughts. In the treasury of the Iron Cloak Highwayman, everyone was overjoyed. The treasury of the Iron Cloak Highwayman was filled with mountains of treasures. Treasures such as sabers, swords, bows, silver, gold, copper, antiques, paintings, agates, pearls, corals. Everything was piled up like a mountain. Even Su Gan and Huang Yongtu were dazzled, needless to say the others. Bai Siling had already thrown herself onto a pile of riches and screamed. Everyone was shocked by his excitement. Were all women dragons? Whenever they saw a treasure, they would beam with joy and be extremely excited. Unbelievable. There are so many treasures here. There must be at least a few million taels of silver, right? As a soldier, Zhang Lin didn't have much of a concept of such things, But he was still shocked by Iron Cloak Li's treasury. A few million taels? Commandant Zhang, you forgot to add a zero. These treasures are worth at least 10 million taels. And they are all gold. The Hu merchants on the road to the west were all extremely wealthy. Moreover, there were more than 10 bandits who had pledged their allegiance to him, and the treasures they offered him added up to at least 10 million taels of silver. It's just that some things are hard to sell. Things like calligraphy and paintings, although they are worth that much, it will be hard for you to find buyers. It's troublesome to deal with. However, even after deducting these, there should be at least 7 to 8 million taels of gold. Huang Yongtu said bluntly. As someone who came from a prestigious clan, he had a broad view of the world. He had seen many things before, and he could see through their value with a single glance. In this aspect, Zhang Lin couldn't even catch up to him. 7 to 8 million taels? Bai Xiling sat up from the pile of riches. She was also stunned by the number that Huang Yongtu reported. Even though women were innately drawn to wealth like dragons, how many of them knew how much it was worth? It was the same for Bai Xiling as well. It was only at this moment that she realized that they had really struck it rich. The harvest from eliminating a large group of bandits was truly bountiful. This operation was like a pie falling from the sky. If only they had known that there would be such a generous reward. The students of the 3 great training camps would have long fought over it. I think that we should take out 1 million gold taels for this operation as compensation for the soldiers who sacrificed their lives. What do you think? Wang Chong suddenly walked in and asked. The group glanced at one another and nodded. The ones who had contributed the most to this operation were the veterans of the Tang dynasty. If not for them, it would have been impossible for the 4 of them to reap such a huge harvest. Putting everything else aside, just the bandits of a small stronghold were more than enough to deal with them. Since Wang Chong wanted to give them 1 million gold taels, there was nothing anyone could say about it. After all, the lives of Su Gan and Huang Yongtu were only saved by the lives of some cavalrymen. The scions of prestigious clans were indeed arrogant, but they weren't completely inhumane. We'll do as you say, Su Gan and Huang Yongtu said. Wang Chong nodded. Leaning against the wall of the treasury, he fell silent. He had seen much of the world, so he didn't mind giving a bit more to the cavalrymen who had died in battle. However, Wang Chong wouldn't do that. He wasn't the only one in the treasury, and not all of the treasures here belonged to him. Su Gan, Huang Yongtu Bai Xiling. He could donate his share to them, but he couldn't force the others to do so. Giving out 1 million gold taels meant that the family of every soldier who had died in battle would receive 25,000 gold taels. This was already a huge sum of money. An ordinary family would only spend around 10 gold taels a year, and the widows of the fallen soldiers wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of their lives. It didn't take long for the inventory in the treasury to be completed. The pearls, agates, treasures, swords, and treasures. Adding everything together, they were worth around 13 million gold taels. Discounting the paintings and antiques that were difficult to sell, there was still around 8 million gold taels left. Huang Yongtu's estimation was spot on. As Wang Chong had contributed the most to the group, they gave the largest share to Wang Chong, which was 2,400,000 gold taels. Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Bai Xiling, and Zhang Lin each received 1,200,000 gold taels. The remaining 1,200,000 gold taels were distributed to the other surviving cavalrymen. As for the remaining 5 million taels of pearls, agate, calligraphy, and antiques, Huang Yongtu took the initiative to take on this responsibility. He decided to use the power of the Huang family to sell these things when he returned. The final sum was split equally between Wang Chong, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Bai Xiling. No one expressed any objections to this arrangement. Everyone had benefited greatly from this operation. Naturally, Wang Chong didn't say anything about it either. Wang Chong. As night fell and the stars shrouded the mountain, Wang Chong sat alone on the hill, gazing at the night sky. A voice came from behind him. Xiling. A hint of astonishment flashed across Wang Chong's eyes as he looked at Bai Xiling. Why are you here? As he spoke, he stood up. Why? Am I not welcome here? Bai Xiling glared at him coquettishly. Of course not. With a bitter smile, Wang Chong hurriedly waved his hands. When Bai Xiling didn't know his name, she would still hesitate to make a move on him. However, after that life-and-death battle and learning of Wang Chong's background, Bai Xiling no longer had any qualms about making a move on him. After all, her fighting prowess was on par with Marchioness Yi. How could Wang Chong possibly be a match for her? That's more like it. Only then did Bai Xiling's displeasure turn into delight. As she spoke, she tossed a black object the size of a fingernail over. This is for you. What is it? Wang Chong asked in astonishment. He subconsciously caught the object, and it felt extremely light, as though it was weightless. I took it from Iron Cloak Li. He hid it in the gap of his clothes. I took a look at it, but it doesn't suit me. I wanted to pass it to you during the day, but time is tight, and Su Gan and the others are around as well. Bai Xiling flicked her wrist casually as she replied. On the other hand, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Lowering his head, he took a look at the object under the starry sky. It was a thin layer of silk. The silk was rolled up layer by layer, and it was only as thick as a small tree branch. Through the silk, Wang Chong could vaguely see a small ink stain on it. Unraveling the silk layer by layer, Wang Chong saw a few words at the top of the silk. Iron Cloak Technique, it's really this. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. He subconsciously raised his head, only to see that Bai Xiling had already turned her head to the side, revealing her fair neck. Her jade-like fingers were lightly stroking her hair, and her expression seemed a little unnatural. Perhaps it was his imagination, or perhaps it was the darkness of the night. But Wang Chong felt that Bai Xiling's cheeks were a little flushed. Why? Actually, even if you didn't give it to me, I wouldn't have told you. Wang Chong took the silk and said. You knew. Bai Xiling's heart skipped a beat as she abruptly turned her head to look at Wang Chong in disbelief. Of course, I'm not a fool. Iron Cloak Li's Iron Cloak technique clearly hasn't reached the level of mastery yet. Without mastering the technique, it would be weird if he didn't carry it around with him. Besides, I even saw you lowering your head to search for it. Wang Chong rolled his eyes. Bastard. Bai Xiling stomped her feet in anger. Glaring at Wang Chong, she turned around and left. Brat, I shouldn't have given it to you. Bai Xiling's furious voice could still be heard from afar. Hee hee. Wang Chong chuckled softly, and his laughter made one gnash their teeth in anger. But as Bai Xiling disappeared, so did his laughter. Looking in the direction where Bai Xiling disappeared, Wang Chong's gaze flickered. Eventually, he sighed deeply and retracted his gaze. He wasn't a fool. Even a blind man could see through Bai Xiling's thoughts. Needless to say him. But at this moment, he didn't dare to accept it recklessly. The night passed until dawn. By the time dawn arrived, the royal court's carrier pigeon finally arrived. In truth, the royal court had already sensed that something was amiss when the pigeons didn't return yesterday. According to the rules, the pigeons with the golden rings on their legs should have flown back after delivering the order. But the pigeons that should have appeared didn't return, and this caught the attention of the royal court. Thus, the pigeons sent this time around were different from the usual ones. These pigeons had silver rings on their legs, and they were able to communicate with one another. While the royal court could send a message over, Wang Chong could send a message back as well. Just this point alone was enough to prove that the royal court had taken notice of this matter. Zhang Lin was extremely swift. Based on the contents of the pigeon, he swiftly wrote a letter back. He wrote down all the details of the situation here in the letter and sent it over. The first and second phase of the operation had been completed, but the royal court had yet to send word of the next phase. As such, Zhang Lin was at a loss as to what to do next. Chapter 362. After Zhang Lin reported the situation, the messenger pigeon arrived swiftly. Roughly 4 hours later, they received a reply from the Bureau of Military Personnel. The royal court wasn't aware of the situation with the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Even the royal court was shocked by the number of bandits and highwaymen that numbered 600 to 700. On top of that, the death toll of 40 men also left the royal court silent for a very long time. to deal with 700 bandits and highwaymen with 80 men, not to mention that there were quite a number of true martial realm highwaymen and highwaymen among them, not to mention, there was also a highwayman like Iron Cloak Lee. Under normal circumstances, these 80 people would basically be completely annihilated. They would definitely die. Without a doubt, there was a huge problem with the situation at the Bureau of Military Personnel. Yet, despite the faulty intelligence, Wang Chong and the others had only paid the price of 40 men to kill nearly 300 bandits, including Iron Cloak Lee and Joan, as well as the entire Iron Cloak highwaymen. This was a feat that even the Bureau of Military Personnel was shocked by. For this mission, the Bureau of Military Personnel had stipulated that each party couldn't lose more than 6 men. 40 deaths was already far beyond this standard. However, this number of deaths occurred in the second phase of the mission, and it was due to the faulty intelligence of the Bureau of Military Personnel. At the same time, Iron Cloak Lee and Joan had been killed as well. Thus, the Bureau of Military Personnel decided to disregard the deaths in the second phase of the mission. Everyone who participated in the mission would be given a basic contribution, and once Wang Chong and the others entered the military, they would be promoted through the accumulation of nobility. On top of that, the Bureau of Military Personnel had dispatched men to collect the corpses of the fallen soldiers as quickly as possible. Everyone would be buried according to the standards of a soldier who had died on the battlefield. Great! Seeing the reply from the royal court, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Zhang Lin were delighted. In this mission, Su Gan and Huang Yongtu had been ambushed by the Iron Cloak highwaymen, and they had lost more than 20 men. This was a grave violation of the rules of the mission. Along the way, everyone's hearts had been hanging by a thread since yesterday. Now that the royal court had decided not to pursue the matter, the duo could finally heave a sigh of relief. Furthermore, the reward that the royal court was going to give them was something that even Su Gan found hard to contain. How many scions of the prestigious clans had ever earned any contribution? Among the 49 sects, at least 99% of the disciples of the aristocratic families were destined to have no fate with battle merits. The two of them hadn't even entered the battlefield yet, but they had already accumulated a battle achievement. This was extremely worthy of celebration. Just this point alone was enough for the two of them to have a much higher starting point than the other scions of the capital. Don't underestimate this little bit. When accumulated, it would be very shocking. The simplest example would be a major victory. One of them was a squad leader, and the other was a squad leader. Both of them had participated in the battle. When the battle ended, who would have contributed more? A little advantage would snowball in the future. In Shangjing, there was no one who did not understand this point. As for Zhang San, he was most gratified and happy that all the brothers who died in battle could receive the same treatment and pension as regular soldiers who died on the battlefield. In this aspect, he was different from Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. This can be considered an explanation. Wang Chong was gratified to see this. He was still thinking that if the Bureau of Military Personnel didn't agree to it, he could make use of the relationship between the King of Song and Big Uncle to facilitate this matter. However, from the looks of it now, there was no need for that. Even though the Tang dynasty was on the decline, the military still maintained a clear and bright demeanor. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, where do you intend to go next? Are you returning to the capital or continuing on? Wang Chong suddenly asked as he took 2 steps forward. There was a moment of silence on the hill. The letter from the Bureau of Military Personnel had provided them with 2 options. First, they had completed the first 2 phases of the mission, and Iron Cloak Lee had already been killed. On top of that, they had suffered heavy casualties, so the Bureau of Military Personnel suggested that they could return to the capital immediately if they were willing to. Second, due to the severe situation the royal court was in, they were unable to spare any manpower for the time being. As such, they were in dire need of reinforcements in Longxi. If they were willing to, they could continue on with the 3rd phase of the mission, which was to assist the royal court in defeating an army of the Yuzhen. Due to the fact that they were fighting against a regular army, there was a certain degree of danger to them. In fact, The danger level was even higher than that of Iron Cloak Li, whom Wang Chong had killed. Thus, the suggestion from the Bureau of Military Personnel was that the four of them shouldn't participate in the mission. However, if the four of them were to participate in the mission, the royal court would reward them with the chance to graduate from the training camps and officially enter the army. Wang Chong, what about you? Will you return to the capital, or will you continue on with the third phase of the mission? Instead of revealing his choice, Su Gan asked Wang Chong. As soon as Su Gan said those words, Huang Yongtu and Bai Siling immediately turned their gazes to Wang Chong. Ever since the incident with the Iron Cloak highwayman, even though no one had spoken of it on the surface, they had formed a tacit agreement to follow Wang Chong's lead. Me. Sensing the gazes of the crowd, Wang Chong pointed a finger at himself, chuckled, and immediately said, "Is there a need to ask? Of course I'll continue on with the third phase of the mission." His words were resolute, and there was an air of domineeringness and incomparable confidence in him that made those around him subconsciously trust him. Even though the letter from the Bureau of Military Personnel stated that the third phase of the mission was above the second phase, it was actually the easiest for Wang Chong. 80 versus 700. Even if the third phase was the most difficult, there wouldn't be such a disparity of nearly 10 times. Furthermore, there wouldn't be a freak like Iron Cloak Li, who possessed the Iron Cloak technique and was invulnerable to swords and spears, turning the tides of battle around single-handedly. As long as these two situations didn't occur, in terms of military strength, even if the Izan outnumbered them, Wang Chong wouldn't be too concerned about it. In terms of strategy and tactics, it was simply too easy for Wang Chong. This was completely different from what the Bureau of Military Personnel knew of. Not to mention, the letter from the Bureau of Military Personnel also mentioned a reward that caught Wang Chong's interest. Once the mission was completed, the four of them would be able to command an army several times stronger than them after they graduate from the training camp. There weren't many people who knew of this reward yet, and most of them found it to be a fresh experience. However, Wang Chong couldn't be more familiar with it. This was a special reward for the scions of the prestigious clans. In the future, there would be a large number of such rewards. This was a shortcut for the scions of the prestigious clans to swiftly rise in ranks. The royal court wouldn't allocate any additional manpower to them. Only the scions of the prestigious clans would be able to choose from their own clans. The purpose of this was to save manpower from the royal court. At the same time, they could make use of the capability of the prestigious clans to recruit top-notch experts to strengthen the military. This was killing two birds with one stone. On the other hand, while the scions of the prestigious clans would have to deploy their own experts to guard the army, it wasn't a problem for the prestigious clans to do so. On the other hand, if the scions of the prestigious clans were allowed to deploy their own experts into the military, their safety would be further guaranteed. At the same time, the contributions of the experts of the prestigious clans would go to them. This way, the number of nobles they could be promoted would increase significantly. This was something that they could only dream of. This was much better than having the royal court assign soldiers to them. In the future, this would be a policy that both the prestigious clans and the royal court would be satisfied with, and it would be beneficial to the nation. However, it wasn't easy to obtain such a privilege. In order to vie for this opportunity to increase the strength of the prestigious clans by an order of magnitude, countless prestigious clans had been vying with one another. This was an opportunity that had been delivered to them. If there were no surprises, this was the first batch. How could Wang Chong let go of such an opportunity? Ha, that makes things simple. Since you're participating, I'll be participating as well. Su Gan chuckled heartily as he made up his mind. Hehe, of course I'll be joining in as well. Huang Yongta chuckled dryly as he made his stand clear. Wang Chong, Su Gan, and Huang Yongta turned their gazes toward Bai Siling. At this point, the only one who had yet to express his stand was Bai Siling. Of course I'll be following you. Bai Siling reached out her hand and gracefully brushed aside a strand of her hair. Ever since I started following you, I've never suffered a loss. I'm afraid that even my uncles in the clan will be envious of this sum of several million gold taels. There must be a reason why you're so eager to carry out the third mission. It can't be that you're thinking of getting rid of me, right? As she spoke, she shot an unfriendly glance at Wang Chong. How would I dare? With a bitter smile, Wang Chong hurriedly shrugged. Bai Siling's thoughts sure were simple, crude and direct. But then again she was right on this point. One wouldn't wake up early without benefits. It wasn't as if he had nothing better to do. It was only because there was something to be gained that he was willing to carry out the third mission. From this point of view, the intuition of a woman sure was fearsome. Hee, don't look at me like that. Wherever you go, we'll follow. As soldiers, there's no such thing as rest before we officially retire. It's the duty of a soldier to follow orders. Even if you go back, we'll still be transferred there. Seeing that everyone was looking at their own people, Zhang San immediately waved his hand and helped them speak up in advance. The reply from the royal court didn't mention anything about their choice at all. Without a doubt, this was a clear indication of the problem. Hearing those words, Wang Chong remained impassive. To him, Zhang Lin's reply was as natural as it could be. Since he already knew the answer, he didn't bother asking. Only Bai Siling's eyes flashed with a hint of pity. They had gone through thick and thin together, and they had nearly died in the hands of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. Bai Siling hated the idea of them risking their lives. It would be a good thing if even one of them could leave. But Zhang Lin's words had already revealed the problem. Thus, Bai Siling could only sigh deeply in her heart. Soon they came to a consensus. Wang Chong, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Bai Siling, Zhang Lin, and the 40 or so surviving Tang dynasty cavalrymen hurriedly set off for Longxi. Chapter 363. The gathering point is right ahead. At the same time, it's also a replenishment point. Armor, weapons, and steeds can all be replenished there. The steeds that we lost previously can be replenished there as well. We can also regroup there. On the official road, surrounded by mountains, Lieutenant Zhang Lin told Wang Chong, Su Gan, and the others while galloping. Along the way, the issue that everyone was most concerned about was the steeds. During the operation against the Iron Cloak highwaymen, quite a few of their steeds had been killed. Later on, when they defeated Zhouan, those steeds were temporarily replaced by the highwaymen's steeds. However, the steeds of the army were vastly different from the steeds of the highwaymen. The former had undergone strict training, allowing them to communicate telepathically with a knight. The meridians and blood vessels in the body had been specially channeled to facilitate the circulation of a knight's halo within the body. Through this, they would be able to bring out the full potential of a knight's halo. Through this, they would be able to bring out the full might of a cavalry charge. The horses of the highwaymen had never undergone such training, so they were far inferior in this aspect. Under normal circumstances, it was still possible for them to use these steeds as a means of transportation to deal with bandits and the like. However, if they were to participate in a battle against the Uzun army, it would be impossible for them to do so without proper steeds. This was also the focus of everyone's attention. We're here. Traveling along the winding official road, the group finally saw the gathering point for the third phase of the mission, after traveling another 40 li. This was an official relay station, and it was heavily guarded. There were regular infantrymen standing guard outside, and every single one of them had a dignified expression on their faces. Thorny halos pulsed beneath their feet, indicating that they were all true martial realm experts. Outside the relay station, there was a huge crowd of people walking to and fro. Their faces were covered in dust, and their morale was extremely low. It seems like the four of us aren't the only ones here. Wang Chong suddenly chuckled. Bizarre expressions appeared on the faces of Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Bai Siling as well. Many people were walking to and fro outside the relay station, and there were quite a few of them who were dressed like scions of prestigious clans. It seemed like the mobilization order from the Bureau of Military Personnel had not only gathered the four of them, but all of the students who were on a mission in the vicinity. Wait for me. Bai Siling suddenly squeezed the horse's abdomen, and before anyone could react, She immediately spurred the horse forward and galloped forward. Wang Chong raised his dashing eyebrows. Just as he was wondering what was going on, he saw Bai Siling stop a red-clothed young woman who had the same cold and elegant temperament as Bai Siling. So it's an old acquaintance. Wang Chong's brows relaxed as he understood the situation. Bai Siling and that woman talked back and forth, but no one knew what they were talking about. After a short while, Bai Siling came over with the woman in red. Yadong, this is Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. The Su clan and Huang clan are influential clans in the capital. Even if you haven't met them before, you should have heard of them. As for this brat, he's that Wang Chong. Bai Siling said with gritted teeth. It was hard to tell what Bai Siling had said to her, but upon hearing the name Wang Chong, a hint of astonishment flashed across the eyes of the red-clothed young woman. She couldn't help but assess the other party. Also, you have benefited from this. This is Yadong, the Zhao clan's Yadong. Don't tell me that you don't know her? Bai Siling introduced. So it's Yadong Xiaojia. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu were slightly moved as they looked at the lady before them with a look of delight. Only Wang Chong had a confused look on his face. Zhao Yadong. Wang Chong finally knew the name of the red-clothed young woman. But why did Bai Siling look as though they should know her name? Wang Chong had never heard of her before, so he didn't know her at all. You should know of the Zhao clan's Spear of Crimson Flames, right? Huang Yongtu tilted his body slightly to the left as he asked with a hushed voice. Spear of Crimson Flames? Wang Chong was getting more and more perplexed. That was a good name, but he was really a good person. Damn it, don't tell me that you don't know who she is? Huang Yongtu stared at the other party, as though he was looking at a monster. Damn it. You make it sound like I have to know of her. Even if you don't know of the Spear of Crimson Flames, you should at least know of the Yao clan's Yao Wenxiong, right? Seeing how Wang Chong was behaving in such a manner, Su Gan, who was standing beside Wang Chong, couldn't stand it anymore. Even though Wang Chong was one of the most influential figures in the capital, his knowledge and experience were truly lacking. Wang Chong also had an awkward look on his face. In his previous life, he had spent most of his time with Wei Hao Mazhou and the others. Back then, Su Gan and the other scions of prestigious clans were still at a level far beyond Wang Chong's reach. I do. Wang Chong nodded. Even though old master Yao only had Yao Guangyi as his only son, he passed down Yao Feng as his only son. However, the Yao clan was not a clan with a small population. On the contrary, the population flourished. Old master Yao's uncles, and nephews were all in the capital city, relying on old master Yao, and they were all very prosperous. Yao Wenxiong was a disciple of the Yao clan. His grandfather and old master Yao were blood-related brothers, and his relationship with the Yao family and Yao Feng could be considered to be very close. In the Yao clan, Yao Wenxiong's aptitude was much higher than Yao Feng's. He had long since stepped into the true martial realm and could be considered as a rare genius. Of course, when second brother was clashing with Yao Feng, the Berserker syndrome suddenly acted up. If not for Yao Wenxiong appearing in time to protect Yao Feng would have long been beaten to death. Even though Yao Wenxiong was heavily injured in the end, he was still able to withstand his second brother's Berserker syndrome, which caused his strength to skyrocket. It was obvious how powerful Yao Wenxiong was. Back then, when Yao Wenxiong was still around, he would have to avoid the Zhao clan's Spear of Crimson Flames. You should know how formidable she is. Seeing Wang Chong nod his head, Su Gan spoke up. Yao Wenxiong had already entered the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to cultivate, and this matter was no secret among the scions of the capital. With the augmentation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, Yao Wenxiong's future strength was unimaginable. However, back in the capital, Yao Wenxiong really wasn't a match for the Spear of Crimson Flames. It wasn't just because the lady before him was powerful, but more importantly, the Zhao clan had a technique known as the Spear of Crimson Flames, which was passed down only to the females. There were a few moves that even those several cultivation realms higher would be unable to withstand. If Yao Wenxiong didn't avoid her, he would truly be foolish. Naturally, Wang Chong had no idea what Su Gan was thinking. However, The fact that the lady before him was able to suppress Yao Wenxiong surprised Wang Chong. From the looks of it, it seemed like she was a figure on par with Marchioness Yi and Bai Siling. Are you all done? Zhao Yadong only interjected after the trio had finished speaking. Her body leaned forward slightly, and her crimson lips and snow-white skin were exceptionally eye-catching, reminiscent of a blazing flame. Embarrassed, Su Gan and Huang Yongta hurriedly turned their heads away. They had forgotten that the lady before them wasn't any weaker than Bai Siling. The trio was whispering to each other right before her, and no matter how soft their voices were, there was no way they could escape her notice. Seeing the awkward state the trio was in, Bai Siling harumphed coldly. These men are the kind who can't take their eyes off a woman. Fortunately, Wang Chong was a little more thick-skinned, and he quickly regained his composure. What's going on? Wang Chong asked. Hearing that Wang Chong had brought up the matter at hand, Bai Siling's complexion eased up a little. She had called her best friend from Longwei training camp over, not for a bunch of men to judge her and seduce her. Yadong, you came earlier than us. You know the situation here the best, so you should talk to them. Bai Siling turned to the red-robed lady beside her. Zhao Yadong nodded her head and explained the situation to the rest of the group. As it turned out, Wang Chong and the others weren't the only ones participating in the 3 great training camps. Based on everyone's martial arts realm and cultivation, some of them had already participated in the mission the moment the training camps opened. Zhao Yadong and the others had participated in the mission before Wang Chong and the others. Even though the content of the mission was different, the danger was equally high. As the other 2 had lost too many men, they had already returned to the training camps. Zhao Yadong was the only one who didn't lose too many men, due to her superior strength. Thus, after receiving the orders from the Bureau of Military Personnel, she rushed over to participate in the mission. It was only after arriving that she realized that there were many others who had received the same mission as her. They were all here to annihilate the Uzun soldiers who had infiltrated the territory of the Tang dynasty. Longxi and the Uzun highlands shared a border. When the 2 sides fought, there would often be some scattered Uzun soldiers who would wander into Longxi. They weren't familiar with the terrain here, so they wandered further and further away. But to wander all the way from the border between the Uzun highlands and Longxi to this place was also unprecedented. This wandering Uzun army doesn't actually have many men, only about 300 or so. However, their combat strength is exceptionally strong. We surrounded and intercepted them, but they still managed to escape all the way here. We originally had more than 800 men, and all of them were regular soldiers. However, we weren't their match at all. One charge from the 300 men resulted in 400 to 500 casualties, and they were immediately routed. I participated in 3 or 4 missions, and each time I was routed, 20 to 30 of my men died. That's already considered a low number. A few students from the training camp died on the battlefield, and their men were completely wiped out. If everything goes according to plan, after participating in this mission, I'll be heading back to the training camp. As Zhao Yadong spoke of this matter, her face was covered in dust, and she looked extremely dispirited. To be able to make the proud spear of crimson flames of the capital so dejected, it was clear how formidable the enemy was. Hearing those words, Su Gan and Huang Yongta stared at one another in shock. They knew that the mission wouldn't be easy, but wasn't the spear of crimson flames saying that it was a little too difficult? For 800 regular soldiers to be unable to defeat 300 Uzun soldiers, wasn't their fighting prowess a little too fearsome? Do you understand why the atmosphere here is so stifling now? In order to deal with the Uzun army, the royal court has paid a heavy price. In just a short period of time, they have already mobilized quite a few soldiers. If everything goes according to plan, this should be the last mission. The royal court is currently in a pinch, and it will take at least 10 days for us to replenish our forces. However, by then, we should have already failed the mission and returned home. Chapter 364. Translator, Zefizi Editor. Diokun Bai Siling had already received all of the information from Zhao Yadong. Those who remained in the resting point were those who had been defeated on the battlefield. The third phase of the mission wasn't as easy as everyone had thought. The opponent's strength was much stronger than he had imagined. Indeed, all of the Uzun soldiers are dressed in heavy armor, and their defenses are extremely thick. Even the attacks of master archers are useless against them. So you must be careful. Zhao Yadong suddenly added. She really didn't have much hope for this mission. If not for the fact that she had met Bai Siling, she would have already turned around and returned to the residence. It was only because she was afraid that the others would be put at a disadvantage that she told them to participate in another assault before leaving. Heavy armor? Won't that make the battle even more difficult? Su Gan frowned, feeling deeply troubled by the situation. What is the background of those Uzun soldiers? Isn't their fighting prowess a little too fearsome? Huang Yongtu was also astonished. The regular armies of the Tang dynasty had always held the upper hand in battles. For an army of 800 to be defeated by 300 Uzun soldiers was simply unimaginable. Those are the elites of the Uzun Empire's Wuhai army. From the riders to the highland steeds, every single one of them is clad in heavy armor. Under normal circumstances, only the Big Dipper army is capable of dealing with them. Ordinary regular armies won't be a match for them. At this moment, Wang Chong, who had been silent this entire time, suddenly spoke up, drawing everyone's attention. Zhao Yadong was astonished. Even after fighting with the Wuhai army for so long, she was still unable to discern their background. Yet, Wang Chong had just arrived, and he hadn't even met them yet. Yet he actually knew their background. Let me ask you, is there a small piece of coarse red cloth tied between the gaps of their armor on their left shoulder? Without even asking, Wang Chong knew what Zhao Yadong was thinking. How did you know? Zhao Yadong was finally unable to contain her shock. Wang Chong was right. Those Uzun soldiers did have a small piece of red cloth tied to their left shoulder. However, because it was indented in their armor, and the cloth was very small, if one did not look carefully, they would not notice it at all. Or they might even think that it was their underwear. Zhao Yadong was a meticulous woman, which was why she had noticed this. Wang Chong had just arrived, yet he was able to point out this point. It was truly surprising. Initially, Zhao Yadong didn't really believe Bai Siling when she said that this kid was extremely powerful. But now she suddenly believed it. Isn't this kid a little too godly? Hee, you only need to know that I know. Wang Chong said faintly, but he did not answer directly. As the former Grand Marshal of the Tang dynasty, it would be strange if he didn't even know the military structure and composition of the Uzun Empire. However, it was not convenient for him to tell them about this. Brat, you're a little cocky. Zhao Yadong glared fiercely at Wang Chong. Wang Chong was the first person who dared to say, "You only need to know that I know," in front of her spear of crimson flames. But Zhao Yadong had to admit that this kid was indeed not simple. However, the Wuhai army is under the rule of the Uzun Great General, Huitadra Konglo. Huitadra Konglo was in existence on the same level as Great General Geshuhan, Go Xianji, and Anong Protector General Zhang Shogui. He had always been strict in managing his troops, and the troops under him were extremely disciplined. They were the main force guarding Yusang Qinghai Lake. They don't leave the Uzun Highlands easily, much less enter the mainland. It's strange for the Wuhai army to appear here. Wang Chong frowned as he fell into deep thought. Bai Siling, Zhao Yadong, Su Gan, and Huang Yongtu were all dumbfounded by the names of the Uzun Empire that came out of Wang Chong's mouth. In this era, they could be considered to have some experience and vision, but the things Wang Chong was talking about were still beyond their reach. All of them stared blankly at Wang Chong, not understanding what he was talking about. Even Zhao Yadong was bewildered, let alone the others. Seeing the expressions of the crowd, Wang Chong shook his head and smiled, ending the conversation. The towering Uzun Highlands was isolated from the rest of the world, and they rarely interacted with the Tang dynasty. It wasn't just Zhao Yadong and the others. In the entire Tang dynasty, only a few people knew about the situation there. In any case, all you need to know is that it's not normal for this army to appear here. Wang Chong chuckled. Who? The group heaved a long sigh of relief. When Wang Chong spoke so confidently and with assurance, It was very easy for the others around him to feel like they were an idiot who didn't understand anything. The pressure was immense. Don't make it so complicated next time. Bai Xiling rolled her eyes at Wang Chong and grumbled. Hearing Wang Chong's carefree manner, even she couldn't help but feel that she was an idiot. Got it. Wang Chong shrugged his shoulders, not bothering to argue with her. Unlike the others, Zhao Yadong assessed Wang Chong with interest, and her eyes glowed with excitement. Wang Clan's Qilin's son. There was probably no one in Shangjing who didn't know this name. Before meeting him in person, Zhao Yadong had already heard many things about him. However, there were always many exaggerations in the legends. Thus, Zhao Yadong didn't think much of it at the start. But after interacting with him for real, Zhao Yadong realized that this Wang Chong was much more interesting than what she thought. What Wu Haijun? What Chano? What Lu? If it was anyone else in front of her, she would definitely think that they were spouting nonsense. But Wang Chong, she didn't know why, but she felt that what he said was the truth, and was completely believable. Wang Chong didn't know what Zhao Yadong was thinking. Next, Wang Chong asked many more details about the Uzun army. Zhao Yadong answered them one by one. Oh right, when we were fighting with the Uzun army, I noticed something strange. There were many times when the Uzun army had the chance to break through, but they kept guarding a mountain. To be more precise, they guarded the mountain the entire way. They just stayed on the mountain and didn't run away. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to continuously mobilize our troops and besiege them several times in a row. And there were a few times when I felt that we were going to be defeated. As long as they won and marched in, I'm afraid we wouldn't even be able to protect the resting point. But they didn't attack at all, and just let the opportunity slip away. It's too strange. They didn't run away or attack. After fighting with them a few times, I can't figure out their goal anymore. Zhao Yadong suddenly thought of something and frowned. The longer she fought with the Uzun army, the more she felt that they were strange. Although she was just a student participating in the training camp, there was no need for her to think about such a deep strategic issue. But the more she thought about it, the stranger she felt. In short, this wasn't the behavior of a normal Uzun army. Any army had a goal, but this army was completely baffling. Then you're thinking too much. It's not that they don't want to run or attack. And they can attack. They don't have that ability. You're overestimating them. Hearing Zhao Yadong's words, Wang Chong chuckled nonchalantly. Zhao Yadong and the others might think that the Uzun army was inconceivably strong, as though they were invincible. But to Wang Chong, the Uzun army had no secrets before him. This Uzun army that had fled to the borders of Longxi was just a bunch of bandits, struggling on the brink of death. It wasn't that he looked down on the Uzun army, but that was the truth. It was just that Zhao Yadong and the others didn't know of it. Zhao Yadong stared at Wang Chong in shock. She had only said it casually, but she didn't expect Wang Chong to know the answer. Wang Chong, you know? Bai Xiling, Su Gan, and Huang Yongtu were also surprised. Based on Zhao Yadong's description, this was a powerful Uzun army. But that wasn't the case with Wang Chong's expression. You're too rash. Do you know why the 800-strong Tang Dynasty army couldn't defeat the 300-strong Uzun army? It's not because they are too strong, and it's not because we are too weak. You shouldn't have chosen to fight them near the slopes. Uzun is located on a plateau, and there's a difference in terrain between it and the Tang Dynasty. The Tibetans had spent many years fighting with the Great Tang on the edge of the plateau. Their cavalry had relied on the terrain there for so long that they had developed an invincible hillside charge tactic. As long as there are hills around them, the Uzun army will be able to bring out 240% of their fighting prowess. Even Geshu's famous Big Dipper army would try their best to avoid fighting the Uzun army on the high slopes. Either they fight below the high slopes in the Longxi region, or they march straight into the Uzun plateau and fight them on the plains. If you fight the Uzun cavalry at the bottom of the slope, you will be placing your lives in the hands of the Uzun army. This is a suicidal move, Wang Chong said calmly, pointing out the reason why Zhao Yadong and the others had suffered such heavy losses. They were the only ones who could think of fighting the Uzun army on the slopes. Under such terrain, it would be a miracle if they could win. For an army of 800 strong to face the charge of 300 strong Uzun cavalry, it would be a miracle if they didn't suffer 400 to 500 casualties. The Tang dynasty was powerful, and when the previous emperors were still alive, they had many famous generals under them. But no matter how powerful they would have to pay a heavy price to fight the Uzun army on the slopes of the Uzun plateau. Even if they managed to fend off the charge of the Uzun army, they would still have to pay a heavy price. Chapter 365. Zhao Yadong was completely stunned. Even without looking, she knew that her face must be as pale as a sheet. Zhao Yadong was a proud and powerful individual. Otherwise, she wouldn't have earned the reputation of the Spear of Crimson Flames. All along, she had thought that the reason why the Uzun forces were encircled was because their opponents were too strong. Never in her wildest dreams did she think that she would make such a grave mistake. Wang Chang's words were undoubtedly a blow to the proud Zhao Yadong. She opened her mouth, wanting to say something, but not a single word came out. Other than that, the reason why they didn't leave the mountain to attack the resting point isn't because they are benevolent, or because they don't know how to make use of this opportunity to maximize their gains. It's because they can't and don't dare to leave. Do you know why they only have 300 men in a group, and not 100, 200, 400, or 500? That's because as long as the Uzun steel cavalry has 300 men, their halos will be linked together to form the elementary halo of fortress. Coupled with their heavy armor, it will be difficult for your attacks to deal any real damage to them. So after so many battles, you have suffered heavy losses. But that group of 300 Uzun steel cavalry didn't suffer any losses at all. So in your eyes, this group of Uzun steel cavalry is exceptionally powerful, almost undefeatable. Wang Chang's words left Zhao Yadong and the others in a state of utter disbelief. In that instant, Zhao Yadong's face wasn't just pale, it was deathly pale. She had no idea that she had made such a grave mistake. If not for Wang Chang's words, she might not have known the reason for her failure, even when she returned to the training camp. In truth, it wasn't just Zhao Yadong. Even Bai Siling, Su Gan, and Huang Yongtu were shocked speechless by Wang Chang's words. Wang Chong hadn't seen the powerful Uzun steel cavalry before, but he was able to deduce the strength of the Uzun steel cavalry just from Zhao Yadong's words. This kind of ability was completely unimaginable to the crowd. Even though they had experienced the incident with the Iron Cloak highwaymen, they still found it hard to believe that such a thing was possible. It's truly inconceivable. There are rumors in the capital that the regional commander's incident and the Wang clan's every move were all orchestrated by this child. At that time, I thought it was an exaggeration. How could someone who had never left the capital possess such knowledge? The Wang clan's old master must have had the intention of nurturing him. From the looks of it now, I'm afraid that's really the case. I'm no match for him. Looking at Wang Chang's silhouette, Su Gan couldn't help but sigh. Thinking back to when they first arrived, they even mocked him for being a commoner's son, and he felt extremely ashamed. The incident with the Iron Cloak highwaymen and the incident with the Uzun steel cavalrymen had unknowingly changed Su Gan's mind, and he had made up his mind. But at this moment, no one other than Su Gan was aware of it. On the other side, Huang Yongtu's eyes were also moving, as if he was deep in thought. But other than himself, no one else could tell what he was thinking. On the other hand, Bai Siling looked at Wang Chang's confident demeanor with delight and pride in her eyes. Once the Uzun army leaves the mountain and enters the plains, their strength will be greatly reduced. Secondly, if they were ambushed and their numbers fall below 300, the effects of the halo of fortress will be nullified. Without the protection of the halo, the fighting prowess of the Uzun army will be greatly reduced, and in the inner regions of Longxi, they will be doomed. This is the reason why they dare not make a move recklessly. It's not that they don't know of an opportunity, but that they don't dare to exploit it. Wang Chang's eyes gleamed with wisdom. In just a few words, he had dispelled the mysterious halo of the invincible Uzun army, turning it incomparably ordinary. Sometimes this was just how things were. No one would point it out, but in the eyes of Zhao Yadong and the others, it was an invincible existence. But in the eyes of Wang Chong, this was just an army. There was no doubt that they were strong, but they were far from being invincible. They were like a proud phoenix that had been beaten down to the ground, losing all of its luster. At this moment, Zhao Yadong's mood had sunk to rock bottom, and even Bai Siling couldn't bear to see it anymore. All right, what's the point of saying so much? This isn't Yadong's fault. We are just students of the training camp, not officers who have officially joined the army. How would we know? All right, Yadong, ignore him. These men are all the same. Bai Siling grumbled as she tried to console her best friend. In the Longwei training camp, Yadong was the classic example of someone who was too arrogant. She wasn't called the Blazing Spear for nothing. But this time, she had met her nemesis Wang Chong. All of her pride had been smashed to the ground. Even so, Siling isn't wrong. This matter belongs to the commander's mistake. As a student of the training camp, you don't have any authority to command, and the failure of the battle won't be blamed on you. Wang Chong chuckled helplessly. Even though he had been rebuked by Siling, she wasn't wrong this time around. The reason why Wang Chong spoke of the situation with the Tibetan cavalrymen wasn't just to deal a blow to Zhao Yadong's confidence. Rather, it was to point out the situation they were facing and what they should do in the third phase of the mission. It wasn't his intention to deal a blow to the pride of the heavens like Zhao Yadong. Even though she knew that Wang Chong was saying those words to console her, Zhao Yadong still felt a little better after hearing those words, and her spirits lifted a little. Let's go and hand over the information. Otherwise, when the time comes for the mission, we won't be able to do anything with just the 40 of us. Wang Chong said. This time no one objected. As they entered the resting point, an official appeared. Wang Chong and the others handed over their tokens, and after verifying their identity, they saw a tall and muscular officer. This man was dressed in black heavy armor, and he had a rugged and authoritative appearance. On his left arm guard, there was a large silver star with 7 smaller stars revolving around it, clearly indicating his identity. He was a Big Dipper army officer, and a commandant at that. Even though he wasn't a high-ranked commandant yet, it was still an astounding feat. Officers of the Big Dipper army wielded extraordinary authority in Longxi. Are you the students who defeated the Iron Cloak Highwaymen? The tall and sturdy Big Dipper army officer glanced at the 4 of them, after reading the letters from the Bureau of Military Personnel. It was a casual glance, but it felt as if he could peer into their souls. Yes, Lord, Sugan replied. The usually lively Wang Chong kept a low profile at this moment. His lips were tightly shut, and he didn't say a single word. Indeed, the fact that you were able to defeat the Iron Cloak Highwaymen is a testament to your strength, but the fact that you were surrounded by the Iron Cloak Highwaymen shows that you are still lacking. Clearly, you are still lacking. While the Big Dipper army officer was still praising the 4 of them, the latter part of his words made Sugan's heart tighten. Lord, you are right. We will take note of it in the future. Sugan hurriedly replied. The Big Dipper army officer didn't say a word. Instead, his gaze slowly swept across the 4 of them. When his gaze fell on Wang Chong, he seemed to pause for a moment. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. But soon, the Big Dipper army officer's gaze turned back to Sugan, and he continued asking him a few questions regarding the Iron Cloak Highwaymen. Sugan answered all of them. All right, that's enough. You can leave now. After leaving the resting point, Lieutenant Zhou stood by the fence on the left. A batch of soldiers from the Bureau of Military Personnel has been transferred to him. You can head over to him to replenish the soldiers. The Big Dipper army officer waved his hand. Yes, Lord. Sugan felt as if he had received a royal decree. The operation will begin in 3 days' time. By then, you will have to listen to the orders given. Anyone who dares to defy the orders, or leave without permission, will be dealt with according to military law. Returning the letter from the Bureau of Military Personnel to the 4 of them, the Big Dipper army officer declared sternly. How could the 4 of them dare to say anything? They hurriedly nodded and left the resting point. Brat, what's wrong? Weren't you acting all high and mighty? Why didn't you say anything at all? After leaving the resting point, Bai Xiling suddenly asked. Wang Chong's behavior in the resting point was completely different from when he was outside. It was completely unlike him, and this left her perplexed. I just had a small grudge with the Big Dipper army. How could I dare to say anything? Wang Chong replied with a bitter smile. Grudge? Bai Xiling was taken aback. Don't ask any more. They did have a small grudge. It wasn't appropriate for him to say anything in that situation. In the end, it was Su Gan who spoke up and whispered a few words into Bai Xiling's ears. Bai Xiling widened her eyes in shock, and realization dawned on her. Geshu Han. Wang Chong nodded, but he was smiling bitterly on the inside. The reason why he didn't reveal his identity to Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Bai Xiling wasn't just to toy with them. The regional commander's incident had caused Wang Chong to offend a group of people, and one of them was the commander of Longxi's Big Dipper army, Geshu Han. In that incident, Geshu Han was one of the great generals who had called for Wang Chong to be executed. The Silk Road to the west had to pass through Longxi, and Longxi was Geshu Han's territory. This was also one of the reasons why Wang Chong didn't reveal his name. Otherwise, someone of Geshu Han's status would only need to lift a finger to prevent Wang Chong from carrying out his mission. It was one thing if it was an ordinary mission, but this was the halo of Dusk Stallion that Wang Chong was concerned about. Failure was not an option. Before completing the mission, Wang Chong didn't want to cause any trouble. I see. Understanding Wang Chong's intentions, Bai Xiling fell silent. One had no choice but to lower one's head. No matter how powerful the Wang clan was, this was Longxi Geshu Han's territory. The Wang clan's influence didn't extend here. Walking out of the resting point, Wang Chong found the Big Dipper army commandant Zhou. This time, Bai Xiling took the initiative to help Wang Chong take on the responsibility and replenish his troops. With the addition of 40 new Tang Dynasty cavalrymen from Commandant Zhou, the four of them finally regained their original strength of 80, after which the resting point fell silent. Chapter 366. Smoke curled into the air. From the peak of this towering mountain, one could see that the sea of fog was flowing down from the foot of the mountain. At this very moment, two armored officers with sabers hanging by their waists were standing at the peak of the mountain, looking down at this sight. Their bare arms and faces were flushed red from the highlands, revealing their identities. They were Tuazan soldiers. Morning was the coldest time of the year. A light breeze blew past, and even the leaves on the trees were pale white. But standing at the peak of the mountain, the two of them didn't seem to notice it at all. This should be the 27th day, right? One of the Uzan officers with thick eyebrows and a pair of sharp eyes asked. His gaze was fixed on the foot of the mountain, and he didn't even turn his head around. It seems like the Tang dynasty is at the end of its rope. The one who replied was the other officer. Just from his voice, one could feel a tinge of aggression. The Uzan were short, and their height was generally lower than that of the Han. But even so, the Uzan were extremely ferocious. It wasn't without reason that the Tang dynasty had been unable to conquer the Uzan despite having fought with them for so many years. The high altitude of the Uzan was one reason, but more importantly, the Uzan were known for their ferocity and valiance. Along the way, we didn't meet with any decent resistance. There wasn't a single one that could threaten us. The great general ordered us to invade the Central Plains to probe the strength of the Tang dynasty. From the looks of it, other than Geshu Han's Big Dipper army, there isn't much in the Central Plains that can threaten us. The second Uzan officer spoke with deep disdain in his eyes. For so many years, Yu Sang had viewed the Great Tang as its greatest foe, its greatest threat. But while Yu Sang had been biding its time and accumulating strength, the Great Tang had long ago fallen into depravity, no longer the same as it was in the past. A mere army of 300 was able to fight their way here. How could they feel a shred of respect for this former enemy? Uzan respected the real enemy, but the Tang dynasty was slowly losing their respect. This time, the Prime Minister sent a total of 2 teams to test the Tang dynasty. One is us, and the other is the First Prince and Lord Dusong Mangpoch. We are spying on the interior of the Tang dynasty. while the first prince and the others are spying on the capital of the Tang dynasty. This time, our mission is almost complete. He would be able to go back after a while. I wonder how the first prince and the others are doing. The first is an officer with bushy eyebrows and a hawk-like gaze said, "Ha! With Lord Dusong Mangpoch here, what problem do you think will occur?" The second is an officer said, "Of course." The first is an officer also chuckled. Lord Dusong Mangpoch was the eagle of the plateau, a great general of the empire. Although he couldn't compare to the king of generals Witadra Konglo, he was still a pillar of the empire. With him here, there would naturally be no problem. The scouts have reported that the Tang dynasty's resting point at the base of the mountain seems to have gathered another group of soldiers. Once they've gathered, we'll kill this group and set off. The latter grunted in acknowledgement. The two looked down the mountain, their eyes shining with cruelty and excitement for the upcoming slaughter. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew past, and the forest behind the two trembled. Viciousness and cruelty could be vaguely seen in the dense green forest, and the backs of highland steeds could be seen. Once the sound of the wind passed, all of this immediately disappeared. Even the two Uzun officers had vanished. All traces had vanished without a trace. Other than a few people, very few people could have imagined that a Tibetan army had been hidden deep in the mountains of the interior of the Great Tang. How is it? Have you found anything? In the resting point, Wang Chong asked. In this period of time, Wang Chong had been keeping an unusually low profile, and all of the intelligence had been gathered by others. I found out that there are more than 20 students in this resting point. The Big Dipper Army Commandant has gathered another 400 soldiers. On top of that, I also found out that the quartermaster has brought over a large batch of heavy shields. They are tower shields around 7 to 8 chi tall. I found an opportunity and accidentally broke one of the chests. On the surface of the tower shields, I found the emblem of the Big Dipper. This should be something used by the Big Dipper Army. The commandant has brought them over from the Big Dipper Army to deal with the Uzun cavalrymen. Zhao Yadong said seriously. She had arrived very early and was familiar with this place. She would not attract any attention, so the task of gathering information fell on her shoulders. 400 tower shields are used to deal with the Uzun cavalrymen. This is a formation that the Big Dipper Army uses to deal with the Uzun cavalrymen. For the Big Dipper Army Commandant to be able to come up with such a plan, he isn't too shabby. At the very least, he is much better than the previous commander who died. However, even though the tower shields are a good way to deal with the Uzun cavalrymen, it's a pity that he isn't Geshu Han. Wang Chong muttered to himself as he shook his head. In Longxi, all of the Big Dipper Army soldiers were deeply influenced by Geshu Han. The Big Dipper rises high in the sky, Geshu carries his saber in the night. This was a popular song in Longxi, such that even Wang Chong had heard of it in the capital. And the people who were singing this song weren't from the Big Dipper Army, but the citizens of Longxi. From this, it could be seen how popular Geshu Han was among the citizens of Longxi. This was also the reason why Wang Chong chose to keep a low profile. Without a doubt, the Big Dipper Army Commandant in the resting point was deeply influenced by Geshu Han. Using the tower shields to stop the cavalrymen at the bottom of the slope, this was the method that Geshu Han used to deal with the Uzun cavalrymen charging down the slope. It was at the edge of the Uzun highlands, where the terrain dropped steeply. If he encountered the Uzun cavalrymen, he would only resort to this method if he had no other choice. However, under normal circumstances, Geshu Han would try his best to avoid clashing with the Uzun cavalrymen in these areas. This Big Dipper Army Commandant was clearly deeply influenced by Geshu Han, but he only managed to scratch the surface of the latter's influence. Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh deeply. What should we do? Zhao Yadong had been staring intently at Wang Chong the entire time, and upon noticing that something was amiss with the latter's expression, her heart tightened, and her complexion immediately warped in horror. As the spear of crimson flames, she was a proud and confident heroine in the capital. Even the scions of the prestigious clans weren't a match for her. However, this time, Wang Chong had truly dealt her a heavy blow, and she had lost all of her pride. At the very least, That was how she acted before Wang Chong. On the matter regarding the Uzun cavalrymen, Zhao Yadong had absolute trust in Wang Chong. It wasn't that she didn't have her own opinions, but the capability that Wang Chong had displayed was far above hers. There's no rush. Even if there's a mistake, there's still a mistake to be made. Even though these tower shields aren't enough to stop the Uzun cavalrymen, without them, my plan will still be difficult to execute. I have my own ways to deal with them. Let me ask you, have you found the people I asked you to help me find? Wang Chong asked. Including Bai Siling, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Zhao Yadong and himself, there were only 100 cavalrymen in total. With this strength, it was still insufficient to deal with 300 Uzun cavalrymen. Wang Chong still needed more manpower to carry out his plan. The more manpower he had, the fewer casualties he would have at the end of the battle. The Uzun cavalrymen weren't like the Iron Cloak highwaymen. These foreign troops were much stronger than the Iron Cloak highwaymen. The might of a cavalry charge was far greater than that of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. In the second phase of the mission, Wang Chong was forced to charge at the Iron Cloak highwaymen with only 40 men. But that was a helpless decision. The resting point clearly had an army several times that of the enemies. It would be foolish of Wang Chong to not make use of such an obvious advantage, and even try to outnumber them. At the very least, this wasn't his style. I do know quite a few people at this gathering point, so I can gather more troops from them. However, the commander this time is different from before. He's from the Big Dipper army. On top of that, he has already made it clear that everyone is to obey his orders. If anyone disobeys his orders, they will be dealt with according to military law. The Big Dipper Army's strict military discipline isn't a joke. They have their own reservations, Zhao Yadong said. With the Spear of Crimson Inferno, she was still able to gather quite a few men. However, Longxi was the territory of a great general of the empire. Violating military law here would result in severe consequences. There's no need for you to worry about that. If the commandant were to pursue the matter, I'll bear the consequences myself. Wang Chong chuckled nonchalantly. But, Zhao Yadong frowned, seemingly wanting to say something. But in the next instant, her eyes narrowed, and she found herself unable to speak any further. That was because Wang Chong had taken out a golden, heavy token from his waist. You actually have such a thing? Zhao Yadong stared at Wang Chong with widened eyes. Since you have such a thing in your possession, there won't be any problems. Even the commandant would have nothing to say about it. I'll convince them, and as long as they know that you have such a thing in your possession, they won't hesitate any longer. Go on. Wang Chong chuckled as he kept the token back. The token of His Highness, the King of Song of the Tang Dynasty, could even command a general of the Big Dipper Army. After all, the King of Song wasn't just an imperial prince of the Tang Dynasty. He was also the head of the Bureau of Military Personnel of the Tang Dynasty. Over the years, he had been the one who issued the orders of the Tang Dynasty, and he had been the one who orchestrated the major operations of the empire. His Highness was a typical warmonger. He had a high reputation in the military. Even for Gao Xianji, it was unknown how much rations were sent to the Anxi Protectorate Manor by the King of Song. At the very least, the protector generals and great generals of the various regions didn't have to worry about logistics and armaments. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.